All right. First item on the agenda this evening is public forum. We are the board members meeting in person and have adjusted the process for community input into our meetings to include comments submitted virtually. So I know we have several comments that have been submitted through the website, and Kat is going to read those on behalf of the community members who have submitted them. Go ahead, Ms. Norton.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. Our first comment this evening is from Jennifer Zagel-Chavez. Comment says, hey, thank you for this opportunity to submit a question. I currently have 2 daughters in the MRH school district. Catherine is a sophomore and Emma is in 3rd grade. This is an amazing progressive district. I have been mostly pleased from preschool until the present. I think I just expected total transparency with the decision to return to school. The district has always been very forthcoming with what the board members and faculty are thinking. If there is a decision to be made, families are always given the opportunity to express their opinions. If the decision is made not to return to school, I want to understand the decision process. St. Louis County has recommended students begin to return to the classroom. I believe our district is capable and will know how to navigate a safe return. Thanks for your time. The next comment is from Scott Boyle. The comment reads, we have a 4th and 9th grader in MRH and have followed the recent board proceedings closely. We are concerned that the discussions have not created consensus on a course for MRH students based on data and health department recommendations. The community deserves the board to be prepared, transparent, and effective in setting benchmarks to make hard decisions between virtual and in-person learning. COVID-19 is our new normal. We cannot afford to educate our children 100% virtually for an indefinite period of time. They will suffer academically, socially, and emotionally. We understand that there are risks. We trust in the hard work Dr. Hall and her staff have done to address these risks. We strongly support our building administrators to guide and protect our students in this new normal. We can live up to the principles of MRH. We must get started. The next comment is from Ron and Caroline Strong. The comment reads, we are thankful that back in August, each of us were able to make a choice among 3 plans that gave all of us an option that would be best for our families. Now that St. Louis County has said it is safe for all grades to transition back to school, those families that selected Tier 2 should have the opportunity to go back to school in person. As my family made the choice for Tier 2 back in August, we recognized that the school district would be making the decision regarding when to go back. Others made the same choice and may have regret, but that should not be driving the decision of the district. Let us follow the advice of Spring Schmidt, Dr. Hall, and the MRH administrators who have said they are ready and we can go back safely. Our kids do not deserve to be some of the only in the entire St. Louis area to be limited by online learning. The next comment is from Katie Nauman. The comment reads, MRH board members, I'd like to thank you for your time and your energy spent carefully considering Dr. Hall's return to in-person learning plan for our young learners. As a teacher at the ECC, I have full confidence that our central office admin team and Dr. Hebenstreit will implement the plan with fidelity and great care. The data for the county now supports an in-person option for all ages. While I have been very impressed with my colleagues and their ability to shift to a full virtual mode and present well thought out lessons through Zoom. However, there is still great frustration as Zoom glitches, audio doesn't always work, young children lose attention and focus with so many online minutes. I ask that you please vote yes and provide an in-person option for families. The next comment is from Jim Brehan. The comment reads, I want to thank the school board for making the decision to start the year remotely and to ask you to please keep the schools closed for now. Right now, the St. Louis area is at the highest level of hospitalizations that we've been at since the crisis started. And we all have a responsibility to one another to do everything in our power to stop the spread of this disease. We're in a horrible situation, and I appreciate how much and why so many people want to be able to open the doors to our schools again, but lives are at risk. I also want to say how much I appreciate everyone at the schools and at home who have worked so hard to make the most of this situation for our kids. The next comment is from Nicole Rainey. The comment reads, Dear MRH Board, I'm writing to share that I am grateful for your hard work and deep thinking as you try to figure out what to do next for our children's re-entry into schools. I have so much respect for this group, and I know you will make the right decision. I understand that you are getting a lot of pressure from working families to reopen soon, which I wholly understand as a working mom. This is so hard. We need a better word for hard. For what it's worth, I want to share that remaining closed until it is safe makes sense for my family. A lot of pressure from work. Thank you for carrying this weight for our community. We are lucky to have you all. The next comment is from Rose Henke. The comment reads, Hello, MRH Board. I am in favor of students returning to school. I know that approximately 30% of families in MRH want to remain virtual and may not agree with me. However, these families are receiving the education choice they want for their children. Remaining only virtual does not give the other 70% a choice. One of the best things about living in Maplewood, Richmond Heights is how open-minded the community is in regards to race, religion, gender, sexuality, etc. However, limiting the educational choice to one option is not being open-minded or democratic. Since private schools and other St. Louis County schools have opened this year, it is evident that students and teachers can be at school in a safe manner. All I ask is that you give all families and teachers the option to be at school and that it happens soon. The next comment is from Andrew Gear. The comment reads, please consider allowing the ECC to return to in-person learning as soon as possible. We are aware of the potential risks, but believe that the social, academic, and emotional toll virtual learning is taking on our children has become a more likely long-term risk. Virtual learning is especially impractical for young children, and sitting in front of a screen all day is developmentally harmful. Even a number of ECC teachers are sending their young children to in-person private schools because of these issues. We understand some families feel differently than we do, and we really respect that and want what's best for them as well. But this is the reason families were given different learning options. We simply ask that you give ECC families the opportunity to choose the learning option that best fits their family's needs. Thank you. And the final comment for public forum this evening is from Victoria Schnoss. The comment reads, I oppose reopening for the following reasons. 1, we in the US, in our state, and in our county have not put in the work required for a safe reopening. The fact that our state has failed to correctly report most recent COVID-19 case count and has been unable to fix a database error in over 4 days is just the most recent indication of the larger systemic failure. Number 2, reopening hurts vulnerable children the most. Their families are most at risk of COVID and with the least resources to cover from it. Number 3, reopening mid-semester will bring more disruption into our children's lives who have just adjusted to the online learning. If we go back to in-person, there will be positive cases in MRH. Whole cohorts of children and adults will have to quarantine with some regularity. This cycle breaks the routine and familiarity that children thrive on. That concludes public forum comment.
Thank you, Kat. I appreciate that. I just would like to acknowledge that we have received, in addition to public comment, dozens and dozens of emails from community members and members of the MRH community. Just want to thank everyone for their input, whether it was stated publicly or has been shared with us through email or other means. So with that, we will move into this evening's agenda. Can I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Consent agenda approved. I believe then our first presenter is the Intner team this evening. So I will let our tech team work that magic and we'll turn it over to them. Hello, Julie. Julie, I think you're still muted.
There we go. Is that better? Okay, everyone can see my screen? Okay, so we've got a brief update today on where we are in our design process. Some updates on the specific projects at the various buildings, and then we'll briefly touch on our next steps. So this is the graphic that we have shared before, and we are pretty solidly in the middle of design development. The elementary school and the ECC are a little farther into design development. We're almost wrapping that up. The middle school, high school, we have just entered design development. So things are fairly well fixed in place. We're starting to integrate systems, materials, finishes, starting to look at casework, mechanical, plumbing, electrical integration, lighting, structure, things like that. For the middle school and the high school, we plan to move into construction documents end of November, early December. The ECC and the elementary will be moving into that more quickly, and we plan to wrap up construction documents probably mid-December, definitely by the end of the year for those two buildings. So the pre-design I'll just touch on briefly. Engineering field documentation is ongoing. So the architectural team finished our field documentation a couple weeks back, but our engineers are needing to come in, look up in the ceiling, look in plumbing chases, see what they can figure out as far as things that we don't have drawings for. So that is ongoing. We have all of the surveys for your sites and some interesting developments with the middle school, high school site. So we have made recommendations to you all for some boundary lot consolidation and right-of-way issues at the middle school, high school. And we're working through those. The geotechnical investigation at the middle school and high school is complete. We have the report for that. Your soils are pretty average. The good news is that the seismic design category results were favorable. So that's going to save us a lot of money on bracing. If we were not in such a favorable seismic design category, we would have to brace lights, structure, a lot of things to a higher degree. So that is good news. At the middle school and the high school then, we most recently reviewed plans with the administration on September 30th, and we're incorporating feedback from those meetings into our designs. We are completing a minor plan reconfiguration to the northwest corner of the 3-story addition at the high school, resulting from some lot boundary discrepancies. So there were some questions about, there seems to be a jog in the boundary at the intersection at Lohmeyer, and I'm blanking on the name of the street that comes in right at the, where your buses enter. And as a result, we're having to kind of move some things around in the building so that we stay within your lot boundaries. Our interior design team is beginning finish selections and casework design at the high school. So they're starting to put together pallets and materials for the renovations there. MEP and civil coordination is ongoing. So lighting design, the utility relocations, we're really starting to dig into, meeting with Ameren and understanding what relocating the transformers means and coordinating with them. Structural and mechanical integration as well. We had a preliminary code review meeting with Maplewood on September 24th. And just met with the plan reviewer there to get some feedback on our approach to looking at the existing construction of the construction of the existing building, so that we're on the same page as far as how we add on to it. So that was a good review meeting. And then, as I mentioned before, design development will likely conclude late November, possibly early December. At the elementary and the ECC, we reviewed the design development packages with the admin at both of those buildings on October 7th, so just last week. And we're incorporating some feedback from them into our designs, and then ongoing coordination with the civil engineer on site work on both campuses. We are also always working on cost estimates. We will finalize some cost estimates with the DD design development that we'll share with you all. We are getting on the schedule for door hardware walkthroughs at the ECC and the elementary school to understand some of the concerns that they have with the existing door hardware, things that aren't working right, places where we want to increase the security level. We will be planning design development review meetings with the middle school and high school stakeholders. So we kind of had a high level review meeting with the principals last week, but we'll be meeting again with the primary stakeholders for the various areas in the existing building that we're touching. We plan to submit for the Maplewood Architectural Review Board for their November meeting. So we'll be packaging up the drawings that they're looking for as far as what the exterior of the building looks like by November 2nd to submit to them to get on the agenda for their November meeting. And then we are scheduling a construction phasing and scheduling discussion to understand financing, and then also what part of the buildings may be available for you all next summer. As well as kind of what moving into the fall looks like as far as construction on site. And then at the end of this, I just had a couple of images from some of our recent presentations. So these are sample design development presentation graphics. This was talking about finishes in the ECC office. So matching the palette that's already there, but integrating some different options if desired. So these were flooring and paint options for the ECC office. This was one of the palettes that we've looked at for the elementary school admin area. And what actually was chosen, this was option A. There was an option B as well. And the selections actually came from both of the palettes, and we are working on finalizing those, and we'll have a finished board that you all can display in the building of these selected finishes. So these are just some of those graphics from that meeting. Any questions from anyone?
Thank you, Julie. It doesn't look like we have any questions here in the
All right,
boardroom. Appreciate the update.
no problem.
We will see you again soon, I'm sure.
All right.
Thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
us this evening. All right, our next item is an update from our superintendent search firm, HYA. Again, I'll mute and let our consultants join in here.
Hi, good evening, everyone. And thank you. I know, thank you so much for the time this evening. I know John's going to be getting on in just a moment. And I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you to Mr. Rich and to Kat and all the others that made this engagement phase possible. I'll share the slides in just a moment, but I think it's worth just taking time to let you know that we do a lot of these engagement sessions, but we have never had such great response on a survey. But also, when we're doing these online, we're never quite sure what we're going to get. And what we got from your community was an incredible depth of thought, incredible passion for their comments, and truly, as you'll hear in a few moments, great pride in the district and so many of the strengths that you had. And we were hard pressed to find some challenges, but that we did, and we'll go through those in a few moments. But I just want to commend the board, the staff, and the community that really helped us facilitate this engagement process, and we are very excited to present these results tonight. And John, you wanted to say a few words before we dive into the slides?
Well, hello, everyone. Again, we wish we were there in person. However, this will have to suffice, and hopefully one day we can get there and meet all of you in person. No, we've had a really good experience visiting with lots of your stakeholders. Over 60 voices, live voices have been fed into this report. You have the leadership profile report, and gosh, just under 700 people participated in your survey, which is outstanding.
Good. Well, thank you. So let's, John and I will we'll kind of tag team going through this right now and share what we thought. And this, as you know, will be used to, it'll go up on our website, and we will share this with all 100 associates across the country. And we'll use this to recruit some candidates. And we think it will be a very powerful recruiting tool based on the results. We talked for a few moments about our broad spectrum of data collection. And before turning it over to John for the strengths, I just wanted to share these three big themes that emerged as we learned about the history of the district. And this was a great learning experience for John and for me, hearing about the trajectory of the district. And we talked to many folks that have been there 15, 20 years and could really comment on the great work of Ms. Henke and the remarkable work of your current superintendent, Dr. Hall, and what a difference it is made to the community. And I think that's the first theme, is this idea of community and how it's intertwined The schools are intertwined with the city council, the social service and nonprofit partners. But we got a sense of community that frankly is very rare to have this kind of symbiotic rapport. And this will be a great way to attract a new leader to your district. And certainly it will be something that they will need to seek first to understand because it is truly something special. The second big theme was equity. We hear a lot about equity from in districts we serve, but very few are as really walk the talk the extent that you do. That it is, as we heard in the words of your staff, it is baked into the DNA of the district. And the people really, when they talk about equity, they really know that there is this commitment to opportunity and access to looking at data about disproportionality, about serving families, about coming together to support those who are under-resourced. It's just, it was a theme that, again, we found and heard from really every stakeholder. The final theme was quality. And, quality is a hard thing to define. It certainly goes beyond test scores. And we learned so much about the social emotional supports. We heard about the importance of the social justice and the action that the district has taken to support students and families. We've heard a lot about how the schools live into the metaphors as another metric of quality. And certainly our firsthand experience talking to teachers, to administrators, it showed us this was not just about words, but about actions and the actions of the teachers, the administrators, the support staff in serving their students and community is really exceptional in every way. So those are the kind of three big themes that emerged. And of course, these are all intertwined. I'm going to turn this over to John to share what we learned about the strengths.
Well, thanks, Max. With your materials tonight is the completed leadership profile narrative report. So we're trying to crunch all of that feedback in our own notes from over 750 plus voices into this short slide presentation. So we're trying to highlight the major themes that are coming out. If you're looking at the leadership profile report, this part begins on page 3 of the leadership profile report, and it's just a summary of some of the strengths that the survey revealed to us. Just note, every single subgroup of stakeholders rated this district very highly, consistently throughout everything. And 5 of the big themes, major strengths rather, that came out here were having an engaging parent base as strong partners in your school improvement planning and your school improvement work. Overriding commitment to equity. Max commented on it. It's going to weave its way through this entire report deeply. Your high standards of student performance, expecting high expectations, and your students have achieved it. And coming from where you were, we heard a lot of stories about 20 years back and how difficult things were at that time for your school district and how far you've come now to a district of distinction. You're highly qualified, effective staff members. I'll comment more about that shortly. The district is fiscally stable. You've managed your resources quite well. I like this last bullet here. 93% of the people either agreed or strongly agreed that they would recommend MRH to families seeking to move there. What an accolade that is to have. So our focus groups that we spoke with, just some, I'm not going to read every one of these here, but the narrative that you have goes into depth about them into different categories, whether it be overall strengths, the student learning environment, the staff, leadership, and community. Those are the big clustered themes where these bullets will fit. Overall pride in the district was just profound. Max talked about the Early Childhood Center. I was taken by, near the end here, the staff are mission and metaphor driven. So the metaphors that you've used to identify with your buildings are syncing directly with your staff, and they're on target to doing that work. Diversity and walking the talk and its overriding commitment to equity again. It's baked into everything that you do there, the curriculum, your exit outcomes, your monitoring of student performance, and even what they do after they leave you. You have a very clear trajectory of improvement, albeit you're planning to update that here in the next few years. And certainly MRH being a district of innovation, very strong. We talked to students, just a snapshot of some of the things they said. They enjoy the diversity. All the kids get along really well, they said. And we have a lot of opportunities in MRH, which they were very grateful for. Your staff, every one of these bullets is vitally and equally important. Your district has earned a high degree of respect in the community and trust. The home visits, we learned about that somewhat later into our interview sequences, and we're totally impressed with the home visit program that you are conducting there. Teachers and administrators, staff are on top of their game. And anyone coming in here needs to be at that level. And again, the quality of your equity work that you have been doing. We spoke with parents, and one parent told us when we were looking to move to MRH, Joe's place sold me. That's a direct quote. I recall another one saying, we're here because of Dr. Hall and Dr. Hall's leadership. So congratulations to you, Dr. Hall, for all that you've done here over the past several years for MRH. Being a destination district was frequently commented on. We live diversity, equity, and inclusion. That is in our DNA, what parents said. So you are reaching deeply into the parent fabric of the school district.
Right. Great. Thank you, John. And I just, in your leadership profile report on page 11, you'll see this chart. I just dropped this in tonight as I was waiting. Because just to let you know, this is not, we're not just flattering you. This is not hyperbole. We do this chart for every district, this kind of state of the district chart. I'll put it this way. I've never seen so much green, in my, well, maybe since the outfield, looking over the outfield of Busch Stadium. But it is truly remarkable. They have these kind of positive to negative response ratios across the board. John mentioned about that 93% of respondents recommending their district to new families. That's usually, just to put in the perspective, most districts that's in the 70 to 75%. And again, there are so many incredible strengths about this district, but we just thought that this was a nice quick color graphic to show you how your stakeholders felt about the state of the district. That said, we do have some challenges. The first being student social emotional needs. And we heard from staff and from parents really concerns about what happens, what is happening during the pandemic, what happens when kids go back to school, how's their social emotional health. We heard it from both high school students and middle school students. We interviewed both responded to surveys. And so this is something that is really a challenge for not just the long term, but I'm sure you're well aware of the immediate term as well. And as always, attracting and retaining excellent staff, given the nationwide shortage. We know that this is a destination district, that people come from other districts seeking to teach and lead here. That being said, recruiting and retaining faculty and staff of color is always a challenge, and your next leader will really need to attend to that as more and more teachers reach retirement age. And just sustaining your culture and your strengths. As John said, Dr. Hall is just building on the great work of Dr. Hankey and the boards and staff, and the community has really created a remarkable district, a culture of trust and transparency, and that will need to be sustained. And so we heard about some of the challenges and issues that will threaten that. I'm just going to touch on three. One about following Dr. Hall, and so for many superintendents, it's much easier to come into a place that needs fixing, where there's trouble and needs turnaround. It's very sometimes more difficult to come in when things are really going well and to sustain that. So we're working very hard to recruit superintendents that can not just fill those shoes, but keep them moving along on this great trajectory. We heard concerns about enrollment growth, and it was interesting to hear that architect's report and about the construction project. But as a destination district, people told us that the enrollment is growing there, and that the people want to move into a district of high quality and excellence that manages their resources well, and frankly has managed the response to the pandemic well. So we understand that enrollment growth in a small district, there's just, frankly, not much more space. And along with that, enrollment growth is the issue of gentrification. And this is really not a school problem, but it is to the extent that the schools and community are intertwined. We heard many comments, often from parents, some from teachers and administrators as well, that with gentrification, it prices people out of affordable housing. They're worried about losing the diversity of the district. They're worried that the families coming in may not have a sense of the history and the trajectory. So this idea of gentrification is, I think, a challenge for the new superintendent to work with the mayors who we talked to, and work with the city council, work with the faith community. We spoke with representatives from them as well, to how we were going to retain this great character, diversity, and our commitment to equity as and provide for affordable housing and resources for under-resourced families. We do like to quote people in their own words. The students said we recognize we think we should have more emphasis on mental health, and staff mentioned the pandemic more than others, that the recovery part's going to be really a challenge. As one said, we'll have a messy, difficult job with it, with the understanding that it's been different rates of growth with the students during the pandemic, with the remote learning and the hybrid model. It's challenging, and it is going to be messy. We appreciate what the staff said about having courageous conversations with some systemic issues, not just in the schools, but in the community, about equity and access. And the voices of parents, as I mentioned earlier, worries about the affordable housing and growth. And again, kind of working with a small district that, are there going to be, with a new leader, where so much has been done with the current leadership and the past leadership, are the policies clear? Are policies in place to really institutionalize what we've done? So those are some of the challenges, and certainly all are those which can be surmounted, but they will need to be surmounted in a collaborative, open manner, as has characterized your district thus far. Some expectations for the next survey from the superintendent. And John, I think I'll turn this over to you and let you close it out.
Thank you. Just to bridge this, I mean, the complete narrative report you have, it really serves as a mini check of your community and staff that I think will be very useful in your next CSIP renewal process. It's almost a mini needs assessment for some strategic planning work. So we hope you keep it and use it in the future. The last question we asked everyone was, what are the personal and professional characteristics and qualities that you'd like to see in your next superintendent? So this is really a very important part of the leadership profile report. It's on page 15 and 16 of that narrative document. This is a really important part that we like to post as well on our website for prospective superintendents. And it'll serve as a guiding document for you when you begin to interview and decide on a final new superintendent. So There's 10 of them here, 5 on each slide. I'm just going to highlight a few because, again, these are all important. They're not one is more important than the other, but all are certainly creatively important here. Having a positive professional climate of mutual trust and respect is extremely important, people were saying. Understanding the diverse culture and population you have, and this high expectations that exist in your school district, someone who can take that and move it to the next level. We heard a lot of talk about visibility. Dr. Hall's done a fabulous job with this, and they want the next person to pick up right where she is leaving off and be visible, not only in the schools, in the classrooms, but in the community, and be an active, engaged part of the community. Having an unwavering interest and knowledge, skills in equity and inclusion. We heard it frequently that MRH is deeply embedded with the equity practices and inclusion. And we don't need a novice is commonly what was told to us. We need someone who understands it's been trained in equity, knows the basis for it, and can move us forward to the next level. Being authentically passionate and deeply interested about who we are and what we are. So with that one, there was a lot of talk about your history and your pathway from where you've come to where you are now, and wanting someone to appreciate all of the hard work that's been put in to bring you to where you are now and have it as a destination district. Someone who can appreciate all of that again and take it from where you are to the next level. The fifth one there, these are all those human relation skills: personable, approachable, accessible, someone who can get along with a variety of groups and individuals in the school district. All of those are extremely important, along with the communication skills. Being highly collaborative. This was a common one. In fact, it was at the top of the list when we started putting all this information together. Collaboration was repeated over and over and over again. Able to work with everyone in a diverse set of stakeholders. Preferably experience as a superintendent in a district of similar size was frequently brought to our attention. If not a superintendent, not a sitting superintendent, perhaps an assistant superintendent who is working in a district of similar size. Number 8 there, being a cheerleader. These are the communication pieces, not only a great public speaker, but able to communicate with a wide variety of community members, accessible, approachable, personable, trusting, all of those human relation skills that number 9 begins to point out as well. Honesty, humility, compassion, even a sense of humor. All of that comes through a person's communication ability. As students talked, we'll go to the next slide. What did they say to us? Well, be nice and come around and check on us. Dr. Hall's around all the time. And they knew Dr. Hall, which is really, really great. They want somebody to care about the students, obviously. This was an insightful comment. I thought being reliable, having a follow through, being honest and forthright. Kids can see through individuals, and if they're not being honest, not being forthright, they can see right through it. Understand that teens see the world differently than the adults. Mm-hmm. That again was also insightful to us. So being able to have that sense that you can think through things from the mind of a young person, whether it's an elementary age student or a high school student, that is a unique ability to be able to synthesize decision-making into what is best for students from their level. And of course, be a cool dude. The staff, what do they have to say? Well, lots of their comments were around the work that they're doing. And there was a significant amount of comment there that there is a heavy workload in MRH, and somebody who can understand the balance of that heavy workload with quality of their own personal lives is important. Understanding diversity, equity, showing empathy, and a strong commitment to equity. Again, knowledgeable, skilled in the practices of equity, the best practices. Someone who knows our staff members by name. These are again, the personal qualities, the communication skills, knows our stories, who's real, seeks to create an authentic relationship with us. And certainly the bridge to that is knowing them by their names. Mm-hmm. Vested in social emotional learning, that's SEL, and equity, again, coming up strong here, and being able to work with board, having an experienced person who knows how to work with boards of education, able to provide tools and information needed for you all to make really tough decisions. Parents, much of the same, open communication, commitment to our work, and a positive plan for our cultural inclusion efforts. Passionate speaker, advocate, cheerleader for the district. All these are extreme communication abilities and skills. Again, the personal qualities here: humble, a servant attitude, compassionate, able to work hard, empathetic, unbiased, fair. You can see all of these really important things that are personal traits of effective leaders. Ability to take feedback and turn it into action. Maybe able to listen to things that you might not want to hear, and do something with it and improve upon it. As we look at the next steps in the process, we right now are collecting applications. We've been reaching out to contacts that, as we asked, the last question of everyone was, do you know anyone who we should be speaking and reaching out to? And we've created a list of those individuals and have been reaching out to them. We are receiving applications, and we will begin to get into those now, do some screening interviews, some reference checking. It struck us, and we have the next bullet here about providing a slate to you of candidates somewhere in late November, early December. This is a little bit later than what we had originally thought of. Ideally, the timeline called for you to be interviewing candidates in 3 weeks. Probably we need to wait on that a little bit, at least the way we're seeing things develop. And what I just can comment a little bit about is we've talked to potential candidates, just like yourselves. They're immersed in opening schools, closing schools, rearranging schedules, all of the things that you all are dealing with as well. So I think some of them are just deeply intertwined in that process, and we may need just a little bit more time here. We're thinking late November, early December. After that, we'll certainly be scheduling some interviews for the slated candidates with you. We'll be talking about contract terms and employment terms eventually, interview workshops, and certainly processes for handling the finalists' interviews. If you all could, somehow tonight or later on, real soon, kind of give a thumbs up to the leadership profile report. We'd like to get that posted on our website so that candidates can look at that and read about it. The desired characteristics section that is again on page 15 and 16 is really an important 2-page document. And that might be a spot where if you feel we've missed something or we've not correctly annotated it, any edits that you want to provide would be certainly welcome to us. We'd like to post that document as well for candidates. Again, as Max said, thank you to the MRH team, the community, the parents, the students, everybody who's provided meaningful and valuable input to this process. Ed Rich, you've done a terrific job in facilitating all this. Thank you. And Maria, you've done a wonderful job in helping us facilitate conversations with the board. So thanks to all of you for the great work that you've done.
We'll be glad to answer any questions. that you have, and look forward to updating you again at the next meeting.
Thanks for that very comprehensive report. Not surprised to hear that the MRH community was particularly responsive to the information and the request for information. So I will entertain any questions, but it looks like folks are mostly good here. I think we've got a little bit more opportunity to digest the profile, but we'll get back to you shortly about posting it so we can keep the recruiting moving forward. I think it also is understandable that we'll need a little bit of extra time to source candidates during this unusual fall.
Great, Katie, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to our next agenda item then, and I'll turn it over to Karen.
Bye.
Good night.
Well, good evening, board. It's good to see you all. And speaking of an interesting fall, it has been a doozy for me as well. And you have before you the phases and goals and tasks for my remaining months here. And I try to update. Oh, thank you. Chris, did you do that? Mm-hmm. Okay, I forgot to do it. I started talking. Okay, everyone. I updated what I had originally presented to you in April because COVID happened, and so has the management of the district and responses that I have to do. And honestly, my main focus in the time that I have students and staff, I really need to be addressing all of these shifts and changes that are occurring as related to COVID. Like today was one of the things that I want to talk to you later this evening. But the main thing I think you all, or Katie was talking about, is some of the archival work. Okay, can you go to the second page for me? Towards the end in phase 4, and it may be more of a spring type of thing. I just wanted to make sure that I carved out time when students are gone where I can really archive things, which is a typical process that outgoing superintendents do. They have things either electronically or they have binders. Now that it's the 21st century, you don't really do binders like that anymore, but that's a typical thing. And it's going, and I do want to say there is going to be another big change for central office for the entire suite, potentially a relocation. So that is another big thing, disruption that we have to address. So I'm changing my thinking. In April, when I first presented, I had a lot of wonderful things going on. I had dreams. Now I'm trying to keep everything from not falling apart. Since we're in this situation with COVID. So I am, though, going to spend a lot of intentional time documenting and collecting things so the individual can pick things up and be ready to pivot for recovery, hopefully, that time next year. So I will be very deliberate and intentional in supporting in every possible way and try and make it as relevant with annotations, because life is really different than what it was when I first started thinking about retirement. So this is what I have in a nutshell. Thank you.
Any questions or concerns from the board? Helpful to get a touch base on where things are at with that. I know time moves in strange ways during COVID here, so just continuing to keep an eye on. All right. Then our next agenda item is the winter sports update from Amber Jordan.
Mute myself. Good evening. Thank you all for the time to speak tonight on behalf of the student athletes and the coaches at the high school. I want to start first by giving you a quick update on our fall sports. Right now, cross country is currently in session with about 25 students. And then we also have close to 50 students participating in the rest of the typical fall sports. And the students and the coaches are doing wonderful under the guidelines. So I'm very pleased to tell you that they are following all the guidelines that we have set in place, and things are running very smoothly for this fall session. So I wanted to thank you for that opportunity to allow our students to do that this fall. For the winter sports, unlike the fall sports, the conference was not 100% on the same page. Part of that reason is because we're all at different entry phases back into school. Some schools are not in session, some schools are back in session. So there was not a cohesive, this is our fall plan or winter plan like we had in the fall for the conference. So I do not have that for you. I do have guidelines, which we can go back to if you have questions, but I do have those in summary in a later slide. For the winter sports, we have boys and girls basketball, cheerleading, and wrestling. What we are proposing for those winter sports, and this, I apologize, is a little bit updated from the notes that you have, because I was in a MISHA meeting today and I've met with our conference schools this week along with the admin team. So I did update the slide a little bit, and this is the only slide that I did update, that we are to allow all winter sports teams to condition and train in groups of 6 beginning November 9th. We would like to allow all winter teams to begin full team conditioning practices. And these would be not contact, but like individual drills, training, weightlifting. So they are still socially distanced during this time, starting November 30th, to try to separate out the different teams. So boys, girls basketball, and wrestling and cheerleading, to spread them out throughout the week so there's not that crossover of teams, to allow them to do this 2 to 3 times per week during this time. And then beginning December 7th, to allow full team contact practices during that time. And then to push back our contest to January 4th. Currently, the state is allowing practices to begin November 2nd. So November 2nd is the official date. So I'm just asking to push that back just a little bit to give our students and our coaches time to fully gain the understandings of all the guidelines. And then pushing back our focus on games to the first of the year, with definitely playing conference schools and then looking at other schools within the area. Sorry, I skipped ahead on that. But there was a note on there, if we go back in person sooner, that we would ask to go back to practice during that time also. Here's just a summary of those guidelines, because the guidelines are pretty in-depth. So I just pulled out the nuts and bolts of it. Currently, St. Louis County is allowing unlimited practices. So there's no limit to the number of participants, but only 2 coaches are allowed in the facility at the time. All coaches need to wear face coverings, and players that are not involved in vigorous activities would wear face coverings. A plan sent by the high school administration team and the athletic department to the Department of Health with a game plan of when we would open for games and to get their approval for how we would walk through a game situation. All athletes and coaches would be screened prior to all games and practices, including temperature check. A list would be kept for all events for contact tracing. Players and coaches would use just regular hygienic use of sanitary and cleaning practices throughout practices and games for all equipment. Locker rooms in those guidelines were not recommended for use. And then equipment and area needs to be disinfected between each uses. Are there any questions so far on the winter sports? Okay. Here are a list of schools and kind of what they are doing this was of last week. Brentwood, which is in our conference, they are proposing to begin November 9th because that's when they are proposing to have students back in school. Crossroads, which is in our conference, are going to be beginning twice per week starting November 2nd, which is the first official date, and then starting contests in January. And then Bayless and Valley Park, who are in our conference, plan to start November 2nd. And Clayton also plans to begin November 2nd, which is the first contact date. Some other non-conference schools, Jennings, they are starting full November 2nd. And then Rittner, Normandy, and Hazelwood are waiting until students come back in the building. An update for the fall alternate schedule. Our conference has adjusted the MSHA given dates, and MSHA given dates were February 22nd through May 1st. And they are alternating that from February 22nd to end April 9th, shortening that season. The reason behind that is not enough teams had chosen the fall alternate schedule. Most teams in the state of Missouri are currently playing and beginning postseason play right now. So as a conference, we are looking at there would probably not be a postseason for us to play in. And by shortening that season would allow our spring sports to run that traditional schedule and not run into the summer months. According to MSHA last week, no school has proposed to go into the summer months with the alternate spring schedule. So if we would to go with that original proposal, we may not have any teams to play, and running the traditional schedule would allow us to have a pretty typical season. There would be a slight overlap, and I have talked to the administration and coaches about this, but we would probably just postpone some of those spring games so that there was limited overlap during that time. And any questions at all about the fall or the fall alternative or winter sports? Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Amber. Appreciate the update. CTE curriculum proposal. Welcome, Dr. Smith and Ms. Withers.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. Alrighty, so we are very excited to be with you tonight. And all right, so when I was first hired, I've been hearing about computer science and our CTE program and our Metaphor. And so over the last year and a half, we've been able to brainstorm what you're seeing today, and we're really excited about it. So some background for you that I'm sure many of you are aware. In 2014, there was a proposal presented to the board to expand our CTE program, and that was really designed to utilize Otto's expertise and to hire Pam on board to expand with business. There had been a CTE plan approved by DESE. We find documents from 2011 and 2012 that talked about the addition of computer science. Last year, when Roxana was meeting with all of our teachers, we recognized that gap still exists. And we revisited that discussion and realized that we needed to include this strand.
So what we decided is we wanted to add a computer science course progression. This would count as a practical art credit, and we're hoping that that teacher will start with 1 to 2 sections. Then on the additional time available that the new teacher would have, they would help with CTE overflow classes, assist with the metaphor and our career connections. So for example, if Otto had computer applications, 3 sections of that, which are always full, then a 4th section could be offered, and the new teacher could assist in teaching those classes.
All right, so before we decided on Project Lead the Way, which you're going to hear about pretty in depth, we did a lot of research, and locally there are many programs offering computer science. These include Launch Code, TEALS, and a lot of online programs like code.org. And what we found in this research was that a lot of these programs really supplement schools and programs when there is already an established foundation for computer science. So those are great partnerships we see down the line from now. So we would just really like to get a foundation and a staff member in place and get it running and vet the program with our kiddos before we did some of this work. But these 3 partners in particular are things on our radar for future opportunities.
Okay, and so looking at rationale as far as local need for MRH, as Sam mentioned, the 1920 curriculum audits revealed gaps in our computer science pathway. And when meeting with Art College and Career Readiness Advisory Committee, we also noticed a gap in our computer science instruction. So this would offer an additional elective option. Each course is a standalone after the first course. No other prerequisite is needed. By utilizing Project Lead the Way curriculum, we're saving time and money by not having to reinvent the wheel. The program has been around since '97 and has proven to be successful for students. Missouri has 931 programs statewide. 110 of these are high school computer science. That's number 2 in the country. And every public school district in St. Louis County has at least 1 Project Lead the Way except MRH. So many notable districts have the Project Lead the Way computer science near us: Clayton, Ladue, Afton, Parkway, St. Louis City, Pattonville, Rittner, Hazelwood, Melville, Riverview, Ferg Floor. So school as apprenticeship could allow MRH to partner with local businesses who are looking for specific skill sets and knowledge, such as coding in Python. And Project Lead the Way computer science would engage the students in real world activities like creating an online art portal or using automation to process and analyze DNA sequence data. The projects illustrate how intricately computer science is woven into our society. They challenge students to apply computational thinking and logic to solve big problems, and they transform students into builders of technology. The program includes multiple 1-year courses.
All right, and just beyond just our local need, there's a global need for it as well. BLS expects that 32% growth over the next 10 years in computer science and specifically in cybersecurity, which happens to be an awesome strand of this program we're looking at. The job growth is tremendous and it impacts every company, whether they are classified as a tech company or not, because everyone has some version of tech and website traffic these days. This is just a quick snapshot that we're going to use to promote the program. You can see that again, BLS says that the expectation is that all of these jobs are going to need people to fill these seats, and you need a variety of education levels to do it. And some of them don't even need an official degree. Some certifications are required to get some of these positions as well. And you can see that the median pay just last year was great, and we'll put our kids in a great position.
So when looking at the career pathways and opportunities, currently we have an arts and communication creative path, and that's a lot of the courses that Otto teaches. That's evolved since 2014. So his mobile journalism class is the AV technology and film. His print shop class is the printing technology. The computer arts studio and publications takes care of visual arts. The mobile journalism and publications is performing arts and journalism. And then computer applications is the telecommunications bullet you'll see there. On the next slide, you'll see that the career path involving business, so the business management and technology, includes currently finance and marketing. So securities and investments, business finance, banking services, insurance and accounting are covered through personal finance and introduction to business and business communication. And then the marketing courses are covered, or the materials under the market are covered through the marketing course. By offering computer science, we could actually add another career cluster within the career path, which would be information technology. And you see there network systems, information support and services, web and digital communications, programming, and software development. This next slide is just snapshots from the actual poster that lists all of the different career pathways and clusters for Missouri.
So when we think about what it's going to look like for kids, we have 4 different courses in the computer science strand. And so it begins with what's the course called Computer Science Essentials. And that can be taught at 9 through 12, depending on when a student enters the program. But if we're mapping out kind of a 4-year trajectory for a freshman, we would see them taking Computer Science Essentials, Cybersecurity, and then the 2 advanced courses if they were kind of opting into that complete strand. The first one, Essentials, can be done on our Chromebook, which is really exciting and includes these topics here. We have talked to our, like Pam said, our advisory team, and a lot of the curriculum that they're using is industry standard, and including some of the work in the advanced courses like Python. So cybersecurity is the real hot one though. So in actually about a year ago, I went to Pattonville and got to see their kids doing this live, and this was really exciting. The students were so proud to show off the work that they were doing. They were collaborating with their school and their district tech teams to integrate some of the cybersecurity work that they were doing. And according to a ton of research, like St. Louis is becoming a hub for tech and cybersecurity in particular. So with our Cortex district, with our booming areas downtown, it's just, our kids would have so many opportunities to get involved with other organizations. The next 2 are backed by College Board, so that there's an AP course associated with those, and that happens to be the Computer Science Principles exam. They're digging a little bit deeper into computer science, and this is where it really starts to go over my head, learning about Python and Java and all of this stuff. I cannot explain it beyond what they're called, but I'll be excited to learn along with the kids when we get it. And this was that 4th course. Again, a lot of the things that are in the curriculum are more in-depth computer science work, a lot of coding, and the potential for internships and certifications increases for every course.
And as Sam just mentioned, the certifications. On this slide is a representation of some of the certifications that the students can receive once they take these actual courses. According to DESE, there are over 30 certifications that students can get through the computer science strand. This next slide is a representation of the different software requirements that are needed for each of the courses. We have been talking with Mr. Holzer and also Mr. Gardner about the different things that we'll need for these particular courses and the software required.
So the benefits, we see some clear benefits to our students. Not only does it offer a different CTE career cluster, but it offers more electives, and we're a growing district. We keep hearing about that in every single presentation, no matter the topic. And so this really aligns with that for our students. The potential of 4 new courses, plus support for our current CTE courses, which could potentially mean we could offer more sections of them, is very attractive for us. It would expand AP offerings. We'd get additional MSIT points with DESE, and then the college credit opportunities for full completion is going to be there as well. We also would be expanding the CTSOs. Currently, we only offer FBLA with Pam's strand. And so being able to participate in the CTSOs, which are the career technical skills organizations like Skills USA, would give our students opportunities for scholarships, travel, I mean, assuming this is post-COVID, of course, and a lot of just amazing life experience. So we're excited about that as well. Additionally, this study is from, I believe, 2014. Indiana University and Purdue did a deep dive into Project Lead the Way and its impact on students. And they found what you see here. The students that took Project Lead the Way and really any of the strands, because they have more than just computer science, but they're more likely to be in honors courses. They're more likely to enroll in post-secondary institutions and go into STEM fields, which are the growing fields there. Like I mentioned before, St. Louis is becoming a hub for tech. And so when I think about the alignment between our CTE work and our Metaphor, schools apprenticeship work, we see this being one of the coolest parts. And so partnering with Launch Code, who actually just presented to one of our internship classes this week, Worldwide Technology, these are all things in our backyards. And so tapping into the brain trust that is this region could only strengthen the work for us and our students.
So as far as implementation goes, this is the timeline that we are looking at. So this month we would be applying to DESE and also completing the MOU, the Memo of Understanding, and then start to apply for grant funding. So I'll get to a slide about that, but one of the reasons that we want to move forward with this is because there is a large grant from Toyota that is due by November 20th. So we would really like to, get moving on this so that we can be in the running for that grant. We'd also need to speak with ITNR. You saw the presentation earlier, and we would want to get on board with space planning for the new computer lab. We would need to source equipment, maybe furniture in spring, hire the person that was going to be teaching the courses, and then get those courses and sections added to our master schedule. Also then the teacher that we hire would be computer science essentials training in spring or summer. That training is being offered currently virtually, or depending on how things go, could be in person. And then we're looking to launch the program next fall in 2021. As far as space planning, nuts and bolts. So the computer science essentials, as Sam mentioned earlier, can run off of the Chromebooks year one. All we would need would be teaching space for that. And we would just need some sort of classroom space, whether the teacher would be mobile or whatever the case may be. Then for the AP courses in cybersecurity, those might require some specialized equipment, both a server and lab. Again, we're talking with Chris and James about that. We're, definitely got a really good conversation going about what we're going to need. And then we would need some dedicated classroom space similar to Otto's Mac Lab right now. And that would be for the school year 22-23. So for 21-22, the teacher would probably be floating. And also, if we're virtual or if the students are needing, to do this work, it is possible that we might, considering the equity involved with, making sure that all students have the same experience, we'd have to maybe think about hotspots for web access or some sort of different accessibility if necessary. So in looking at year one estimated startup costs for Project Lead the Way, equipment and all of the professional development and participation fee and staffing, we're looking at an estimate of about $66,000. Additionally, costs would have to do with equity. Again, we want to make sure that we have web access available to all students who wish to participate, whether COVID or just their homework. We need to make sure that all students have the tools that they need so that they can be successful and have access to these amazing opportunities that this strand would open up for them. Also, you'll see on this graphic some of the estimates that we have put together as far as materials needed. So we would need some Android tablets, headphones, status indicators, self-driving vehicles, etc. So that's part of the costs. And then possible funding sources. This is where I was referring to the grants that are available. DESE has grants available that you can apply for annually for each new course. So they're enhancement grants due in February. They cover classroom renovations, furniture, etc. There are also some 50-50 grants available. Those are due in July. So those cover half the cost to train the teachers, costs for the first year fee, 50% reimbursement for equipment and supplies over $200. And then the Toyota grant, the one that's really driving our timeline right now, again, due November 20th, that would be $20,000 over 3 years. So for the first year, 21-22 would be 10,000, 22-23 would be 5, and 23-24 would be 5. So that is specifically for new computer science programs for which we would qualify. And then there's CTE grant money and Perkins available to help offset some of the costs as well.
All right, so some additional considerations. I've been working with James quite a bit. He's looked at the server requirements and some of the programming, and we are talking with our colleagues at Hazelwood and some of our other schools who have gotten this started recently and are using the similar types of Chromebooks or Macs that we are using. And so I feel like we could update this slide every day with things that we're finding out. I was pleased to hear actually just this week that the Chromebooks have been able to run a lot more of the curriculum because Project Lead the Way has been tweaking as a need based on the virtual space. So we could get a lot more use out of our Chromebooks than we originally planned for. The robotics and educator kits that come in that first course, depending on how many students apply or want to take the course, that might have a few extra costs there. We additioned the $1,200 for PD and conference costs on that previous slide, something like METC, which is something that auto attends, anything else in the computer science field that's relevant to keep us up to date. And then again, just reminding that next year would have to be for sure flexible classroom space, unless we can produce a space out of nowhere that is correctly wired, and then go to that more permanent space the year after. Like I said earlier, there's just so many programs and online tools that can help support computer science programs. So again, we're going to be working with them after we get our base program started. We know people in all of these organizations that we can partner with pretty easily. So we look forward to those future partnerships. And just kind of wrap it up. So our enrollment is growing and we're really excited about expanding our CTE course progressions because that's what we said we were going to do before. And we know that this stuff is good for kids. It's giving them opportunities for certifications. It's giving them the chance to take more rigorous courses, get college credit with AP and other things like that. The demand is just growing. You saw the slides about the salaries and the field that's just over the next 10 years, it's just going to keep going. We are the 4th largest PLTW state in the country. And we have so many partners and so many people who have done this work before us that we can look to for support as we build our own program. Again, we are the only one left that does not have any kind of Project Lead the Way programming. So we want to level that playing field and get our students that same access. The alignment to our metaphor work is so clear, and the opportunities for internships, apprenticeship programs, additional partnerships, we're just scratching the surface there with that. We know this is going to be a really high interest program. We've already started talking to students about it, and we just think the sky's the limit here. So we're just so excited, and I believe that leaves us open for any questions that you might have for us.
Thank you both for the presentation, very comprehensive. Appreciate that. I think there's no doubt that the computer technology field is an important one in our region and in our broader society. So appreciate that we can include that. I think my only questions would probably actually be for somebody like Roxana about just the budgetary implications for new staff, but as far as, you know, the opportunity to pursue this grant right now, I think we're, you know, probably open to that opportunity, and can kind of revisit as it makes sense for adding staff.
I would just say that we have added in our 5-year projections elective staffing for electives at the high school, knowing the growth is going there. So this would be something that would be already in our projections, and not something that we would see as an addition to those projections.
Any other questions, board? Go ahead, Francis.
Just a comment I would just can add. I think it's a great program. I really appreciate the presentation. I think it's spot on. As you probably have already had conversations around that, I would also like just encourage you to look at geospatial as a subset of IT, with NGA being here locally, and the opportunity there. I think they're eager to partner with youth programs and other things as well. And that's just getting off the ground. So the timing there might be really, really good.
Awesome.
Are we good?
I think the plan at this point, Wes, if we didn't ask you to vote on it tonight because it was the first time you were seeing it, you would be voting on it ahead of when we'd submit the grant. So assuming that we didn't hear objections, we can go ahead and work on the grant. You can approve it at the next meeting and we can submit thereafter.
Thank you both for calling in this evening, and we'll move on here.
Thank you.
Vince, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Reentry assessment, Roxana and Rachel.
So we are here to talk to you about assessment and reentry planning, and Rachel and I are going to tag team this a bit. We do have, I'm going to let Rachel talk a little bit just about the revised assessment plan. I don't think there's anything really earth-shattering here, but I'll let her go ahead and speak to that.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Ward, Coordinator of Assessment, Data, and Accountability for the district. It's good to see you all again. Just a quick review. We had to make a couple changes to our assessment plan that I presented previous this year because of COVID and its impact. So one decision that we made, these are to summarize the changes here. One, we decided not to administer the ACT Aspire this fall for many reasons, but we just didn't think it was going to be a good use of our time with our students. It's a nationally normed assessment that we use to compare to our MAP and EOC data, which we did not have from the spring. We get the results later, like in January and February, and we're going to focus on what our immediate individual student assessments, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. We also chose to administer our PSAT. We usually give that in October. We chose to move that to January. That was a new administration that PSAT has offered. And so we took advantage of that opportunity. And we also, the ACT that we normally would give to our juniors in the spring was canceled. And so we administered it just now in the fall to our current seniors. So this is just a plan that reflects those changes that I just mentioned, the matrix and then the calendar. There's also a revised PDF, the larger document that you should have access to that as well. Are there any questions about the revised assessment plan? The next thing I will talk about this evening, if it's okay to move on. Okay. Our
You're fine,
720
Rachel. We're having some unmuting problems here, so go ahead.
Gotcha. Some DESI updates and some APR-ish data for the 2020 year. So a couple updates. Because of COVID-19, there will be no official 2020 APR. That's our annual performance report. So I'll be presenting some data tonight that would normally be in our APR, but we're not actually getting an APR. They also are going to provide an EOC participation download from the spring to represent the participation in those assessments, even though that they were canceled. And then they still by law are going to replace or going to create the district report card, and that will be published by December 1st. And so the data I'll be covering this evening will be on that report card. So again, no official APR report. A quick reminder about there are 5 standards that are used in the current MSIP 5 model with the APR report. Standards 1 and 2 are related to achievement data and come directly from the MAP and the EOC. And we do not have that data because we did not administer spring assessments. Standard 3 is all about college and career readiness. And standard 4 is attendance. And 5 is our graduation rate. So I'll be reporting on 3, 4, and 5 this evening. So for college and career readiness, there are 3 different categories. The first are have to do with our college ready assessments, ACT, ASVAB, AccuPlacer, things like that. 3.4 is advanced coursework, that's dual credit, AP. And then 3.5 and 6 are the post-secondary placement, which is our graduate follow-up. So I just wanted to represent our numbers here and show you what our 2020 numbers for those categories are and for the past 3 years. Our attendance, again, remember attendance is now our the percentage of students that have 90% or better attendance. This attendance for last school year did not include when we were closed in the spring. Our district attendance was at 92.4. So 92.4% of students in the district had 90% or higher. And then I included the last 3 years for each individual building. And then our graduation rate, they report on a 4, 5, 6, and 7-year graduation rate. And so the far right column is our 2020 4-year, 5-year, 6-year, 7-year graduation rate. I do still have 2 appeals pending with DESI currently. So the 2020 4-year graduation rate may shift slightly. Any questions? I went through that much faster than I usually do. So please ask questions if you have any.
All right, then I'm going to talk about our preliminary STAR data. And again, there's a lot of data here. I'm not going to belabor it. I'm going to try to hit the highlights for you and then let you ask questions if you have them. The STAR data is our nationally normed test that we give 3 to 4 times a year to all students in grades K through 8. And this screener is super important to us because it's really the cornerstone of our RTI process. It's a computer adaptive test, so we have been able to let the students take it even though they have been learning virtually at home. And we did that via video conference with proctoring, so that was very interesting. So shout out to Rachel and her team for being able to make that happen in even the most challenging circumstances. Part of what you're going to see in this data, well, let me back up a bit. We use this data for two very important reasons. So one reason that we use the data is to see how we're doing programmatically and to understand if our curriculum is working and we're seeing the things that we expect to see. But that's not the most important reason we use the data. The most important reason we use the data is to really know what's going on with individual students, to pinpoint very specifically what they're doing very well that we can build on. And then if we see any patterns in the data that would help us understand how better to help the students or to reshape their educational experience. So primarily that is how we use the data. Our overall results this year, we wanted to look at this data very carefully and do a comparative look at how the students' entry data this year looked comparative to how their entry data would look in any normal year. So part of what we were looking for was to see if we had learning loss from our last closure and how that might impact our instruction moving forward and whether or not that was impacting certain students perhaps more than others. And so that is something that we paid particular attention to. What I can tell you on the outset before we go through all these slides, let me just cut to the chase and tell you what we found, and then I can show you what that looks like. We found that our reading scores overall look very stable. So reading loss or reading learning, I should say, progressed fairly normally during the closure and actually looks quite good. We see a little gaps and a little shift, but nothing to be concerned about. We did see some loss in math, particularly as the math becomes more complex. And that makes sense because students can read for pleasure, parents know how to read and encourage reading, but to just spontaneously practice complex math probably is not happening. And so you're going to see that happen. You're going to see that shift begin really in 6th grade. Our 7th and 8th grade data is currently incomplete. They're still doing some of that testing, but preliminarily, we see that shift also continuing in 7th and 8th grade. And so I'm going to show you some data now, and then we'll talk about the district response to the data because we have quite a few things actually happening. So this first slide that I have up right now is our star reading in grades 2 through 8. What you typically want to see is anything, the bands are higher because that's number of students on the side. So I'm really paying attention to the percentages that are on those bands. But we would really want to see a normal distribution would be anything in the yellow, like 50% yellow and below and 50% green or higher, okay? Again, you're seeing differences in the bands because it's also reflecting numbers of students. So when we look at this distribution, it looks fairly normal. And you can see that better from the line graph. So the line graph is that 50% line that we would expect to see, right? Our MRH typically is above that, which is good. That means our students are actually performing higher than we would expect. When we cross that line, we're now dipping into just slightly below normal. So you can see that we're not done testing in 8th grade, so perhaps that might be what's happening there. But you can see that distribution looks pretty good for reading. You can see the distribution for math now in the percentage bands, but we'll take a look at this line and you'll see that our math scores are above, and then somewhere around 6th grade, they began to cross, which is part of what we're looking at because that is not necessarily a normal growth pattern that we would see at MRH. Okay. We did that by grade level. So you have grade level data. This would be their fall last year, same group of kids. So the first line, if you can see my cursor, is 1st grade. What they did last year is kindergartners. This middle one is our mid-year testing that we got in, and you can see we made gains, right? And then we look at what is actually happening this year in the fall, and that is fairly normal. That's a fairly normal distribution. 2nd grade is difficult because we have early literacy and some of the kids transition to our regular reading testing. So you have 2 types of testing. So you're really looking at this first band compared to the very last one over on this side of the screen. Again, that looks fairly normal. Okay, now we have 3rd grade. You can see reading looks fairly normal. You can see we're starting to see a little bit of spread here in the math with 3rd grade. If I go to 4th grade, that trend continues. Reading looks fairly normal. We're starting to see a few more kids here in 4th grade. You can see that also continues in 5th grade. It's a little more noticeable still in 6th grade. And so you can kind of see visually what I'm talking about. We also wanted to look at growth. So we have in here for you what's called an SGP, or a growth measure. And so what we want to see is we want to see at least 50% of what's in blue. So if 50% or more of what's in blue, we're growing at a year's rate or a normal rate. You can see that that is true for all grade levels in reading. It is not true for all grade levels in math. Okay, so we're seeing, again, here in early math, we're seeing perhaps not as much growth as we would have expected to see in those areas. And so that's something that we really wanted to look at. We also looked at disaggregated data. And so what you will see here, the darker blue is our white students, and this lighter blue is our non-white students. And you see that crossover starting to happen here in 6th and 7th grade for reading. You see that also we are dipping under the line for our free and reduced lunch students even earlier than that. So I think you're seeing a little bit of the of disparate impact in terms of the COVID closures. Here's math. Again, you're going to see that dip. We start to see that in 6th grade for math, and it is lower all the way across for our free and reduced lunch students. So that's something that is concerning, and we really want to make sure that we are handling that right out the gate. So the district response, I did want to talk to you about that. Based on this data, well, actually, we're happy to have the data now, but RTI teams are meeting regularly. They have set up very specific interventions for specific students because we have this data specific to individual students. Students are currently receiving small group and individual instruction in support blocks that are planned specifically for their needs. Math specialists are doing individual math interviews, which is basically they sit and talk to kids about math to make sure, in addition to the testing we're doing, for any students that are below the 25th percentile, to make sure that we can really get in and start to unpack how students are thinking about mathematics. Teaching plans are then developed specifically for those students that are more focused around not only their needs, but also their learning styles. Supplemental math teachers are also pushing into math classes to provide support during their regular classes with math instruction, in addition to the small group and one-on-one. We also have added daily support after school hours for tutoring and learning labs at all of the grade levels. We have planned actually for tomorrow. We've been doing it across the summer, but we're doing planned professional development for math teachers to really talk about what mathematics should look like in a blended instruction model, and to make sure that the strategies we're using are well suited for the virtual environment, because what we normally do in the classrooms isn't an automatic transfer. All of the CAT leaders are participating in the DESE priority standards meetings to make sure that what we're focused on are really the most essential elements that would keep kids moving forward progress. At the middle school, we have purchased special e-textbooks of our research-based math program to allow that virtual instruction to actually happen much more smoothly, because everything that they are now using is designed for the virtual space. Math team members meet every week with the administrators, and they have been doing that since summer to continue these conversations around specific students. We also applied for and received a STEM Pack grant. So we have a STEM Pack team that is made up of teachers K-8 along with the administrators and our math specialists. They meet once a month with our partnership team at Washington University. You remember last year we did the math audit, and so those changes in scope and sequence have happened, and we are following up on a regular basis to make sure that those things are being done with fidelity. Also, we added, with your support, 2 supplemental math teachers. So we have an additional supplemental math teacher at the elementary and at the middle school, and that has been incredibly helpful in this environment. So that's our STAR report. We just wanted you to know what we're seeing and what we're doing. Hopefully we are monitoring this and are staying a few steps ahead, but it is something that we want to keep our eyes on.
And I just want to add one thing also, coming from the state expectations and what the commissioner is expecting also is for all school districts to provide formative assessments for the students. She, and I don't know if I mentioned it to the Board of Education, but officially the commissioner and DESE, our Department of Education, is planning on having students take standardized tests this spring in the April. That is MAP testing and EOCs. So as you saw in my succession plan, you know, getting ready to leave, I'm meeting with all of these individuals and I'm sitting at the table, and all the talks are starting now with the superintendents trying to rally and have some courageous conversations with the commissioner regarding standardized testing this spring. But when I go to those meetings, actually I meet with the commissioner tomorrow, she is strongly telling us to have formative assessments out to our students so we can measure what the learning gaps have occurred during the stay at home, and to then begin to remediate and do whatever we can in whatever format of learning that we're in. There's a lot of politics that she's navigating, and I don't know exactly what those politics are, but unfortunately our schools are going to be in the middle of it, and looking at the learning gaps and trying to address it is something that of course is very important, but also I just have some concerns, especially with the big push for standardized testing in April, knowing everything that we're going through and that the state is also experiencing such variance in terms of how we're educating kids. So I want to thank Roxana and her team and Rachel for being able to administer this and be able to present this. It's very, very important that we stay on top of all of our assessments and how our kids are coming along. And then also as much as possible with the education and the format that we're doing, because there's looking like there's not going to be much mercy coming. But again, we don't know what's going to happen after the vote, because that might change. We'll see. It's just, we're kind of in the middle with the politics right now.
Thank you for that. Questions from the board? Roxanne, I just wanted to confirm, we have seen historically some challenges in our math achievement though. So I'm heartened to hear that that reading is, you know, progressing fairly, typically right now. But just to confirm, we were already paying attention to some of the math underperformance in the district, even prior to COVID. That's correct. Great. All right, we can move forward to Vince's presentation then.
Good evening, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay? It's interesting to be Zooming in person. It's kind of like when my college-age daughter texts me from the next room. But it's great to be here in person. I love it. I'm going to share my screen and share with you just, guys, a quick update on our enrollment. Let's see. So, I presented to the school board on September 17th. So I just wanted to give you updated numbers, not a big change from the September 17th presentation. But as you remember, our official count date that goes to DESE for our core data is the last Wednesday in September, which this year was September 30th. So just a quick update, not significant changes from the September 17th presentation. Again, our overall, growth from over the last 15 years is still significant, 46% district growth. But this year we did, compared to last year, we have 22 fewer students on our official count date, which does end a 13-year run of growth. But given the unique circumstances of COVID-19, and we did have a large cohort of homeschool options. That was what really impacted those numbers. But again, the growth is healthy across the district and all the buildings. The freakishly large growth, as a reminder, in ECCs because we added second grade there in 2017-18. So I just wanted to remind the group about that. So we do two analyses. We do grade level, and then we do a cohort analysis. And again, fairly stable, but again, we lost 22 kids, which is down 1.5%. But the numbers really were not much different than they were in from last month. We had a large cohort of kindergartners last year. Now they're first graders. So there's some differences there, but we still have really healthy enrollment numbers throughout the district. If you looked at our numbers, we have, of our 13 cohorts, all of them are at 100 plus. So we only have, and that just would have been unfathomable 10, 15 years ago to see those numbers. So we still have a very healthy, thriving community of students here. So that's the grade level analysis. And again, as I pointed out, that we had 44 students choose the homeschool option this year compared to 7 the previous year. So if you think about that difference of 37 students, I think actually it had a normal year, we probably would have added 10, 15 students this year. A cohort analysis, again, pretty stable trends. We lost a total of 46, so it's about 4 per class on average. Largest changes were in grades 1 through 4. So I always ask myself, well, why, if we lost 46 kids in our cohorts from last year and we only lost 22 overall, it's because we graduated 87 seniors and brought in 111 kindergartens, which is a plus 24. So that kind of offsets the loss, which is how we ended up with a district loss of just negative 22. So cohort analysis again, but I think with some of the families, there was an interest in trying to homeschool their kiddos compared to maybe doing a tier 1, tier 2 option. So that's where we had most of our changes in grades 1 through 4. And this is a new slide this year because we had the tiers. So I want to kind of, and again, a lot of changes from the September 17th presentation. But we have the vast majority of our students chose the option 1 MRH tiers, where they're working with using our curriculum, it's learning and working with MRH teachers with the opportunity to come back if and when we do. We have about 17% of our students using the virtual academy on all the semester, either school's PLP or the launch program. And I did include the homeschool numbers, so you kind of saw where they were, kind of what grade levels were where we had students that chose homeschool. And it is possible if at any point in time when we decide to go back in person, some of the homeschool students might rejoin us. So we'll certainly track that information as well. So quick update, I'd love to come back. I mean, I'll be back every month, but I would love to represent this information again in February and add more depth on the demographic side. By February, I will have information about our special education numbers because their official count date is in December. Our free and reduced lunch count date goes in at the end of January. So I'd love to kind of come back in February with a more robust presentation that gives you some demographic profile of our district. Would that be of interest to you guys, which I did last year. So that's it. That's all I had. Any questions at all? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. I appreciate that. Moving on to the policy batch.
Well, thank you, Katie. So this
Great. Any questions about the policy batch or anything to flag for? We're not voting on these this evening. Have another opportunity to review. All right. And then the presentation on essential workers. Go ahead, Karen.
Sorry, I just figured out
Okay, there, can you hear me? Okay. Hold on a second. Essential workers, can you all hear me? Okay. I'm having some issues showing that. Okay, I have a delay. So as you all know, I sent you all a critical issue with the background around the resolution. And it's been a few months when this first came into all of our understanding. I think it was August that Washington, D.C. wanted to include school staff to be identified as essential workers, and they really didn't have the authority to do so. And it caused some confusion for school districts. And so MSBA took it upon themselves to clarify that. And that was in the critical issue for background. And then I also took it upon myself to ask for a professional opinion memo from our district attorney, so you all would know right away what her thoughts are. I do not support the resolution to declare educators as essential workers. I don't think it's safe to say if by chance they have contracted because they're essential, they don't need to quarantine, or if they've had exposure, they don't need to quarantine, they go back. I'm not doing all that. I don't think that is for the health, physical or mental health of anyone. I don't want to do it. I'm being very straightforward about this. I put it in the critical issue that I sent to you all. I don't like it. I don't think it should be done. I'm surprised that Cindy, as opinionated she is, she was like, well, if you want, you could. She was very diplomatic about it. I'm telling you, I don't recommend it at all, but you can do what you want. It's there. I don't have it there for a vote. I have it here just right now for discussion. So there you have it.
Great, thanks for getting the district attorneys weigh in on that. Any questions or comments?
I don't know if anybody else had done any of this workers. I think we kind of focus on just these are the people that keep us afloat during a pandemic, which they do. But I did not know if they actually be exposed or potentially being asymptomatic would still be around other people and potentially risk infecting other employees. And obviously that is another
Chris, I can't hear her.
We're having some challenges here. Brandy. For you, yeah. All right, well, we can hear Brandy. Thank you.
I heard.
Any other comments? Board. Right. Again, Karen, thanks for bringing this forward and for the proactive stance on that. We'll move on then to the DESE updates from Roxana.
All right, so this DESE update will be fairly short. I always bring to you every year anything we're hearing new about the law and or accountability measures. Really, it was a very uneventful legislative session. There were a lot of things they were talking about. Very few things passed that would actually impact the school district. There was an omni bill really that just told us that we shouldn't vape in schools, which we don't do here anyway. And it provided lots of other rules for those of us that have AEDs in our building that we have to pay attention to, including some required training pieces. There was a law that was also passed that impacts how property taxes are collected. I don't have that one on here because that will ultimately impact us, but it's not something that we carry out. And then they followed up with in the 2019 session, they came up with a law that would allow teacher externships, which basically means that teachers could be placed in a business over the summer. They would work for the business and complete projects. And if they did that under an agreement with the school district, it could be counted as 3 college credit hours, which could be applied to our salary schedule. So this year they put out a handbook on how that would work. Our intent would be to raise that with our CBTF committee to see if that's something we're even interested in. If it is, then we would have some business development pieces that would need to happen for us to enact that program. So I did want you to know that that is on the horizon and something that we will continue to talk about. A lot of what happened were variances either that DESE gave or that were actually signed by the governor as waivers for statute. So you'll see those here. I'm not planning on reading all of those to you, but you can see that a lot of our attendance requirements and our testing requirements were either canceled or deferred, meaning that we had a much longer time frame to get some of those assessments done. It did have some impact on us. For example, our HiSET testing, which is our alternative school students that participate in the program. Many of them were ready to test and were unable to test because testing centers were simply not open. So we did have some of them test late. Those are some of the graduates that Rachel has on appeal right now because they're not showing in our guidelines. If we look at all the statutory waivers, you can see that most of those waivers were removing requirements for us to do some forms of screening or testing that would normally be done and reported as part of our June core data report. And some of that would filter into our APR, which Rachel just told you will not be produced this year because all of these things did not happen. Also new, there has been a waiver, a temporary waiver that changes the rules for substitute teachers. So substitute teachers typically are required to have 60 college hours. Currently, they have waived that. So someone with a high school diploma could get a substitute teaching certificate if they did a fairly high number of hours of professional development, either with the district or through an approved source. And the purpose of that law, which is intended to be temporary, is just to increase the subpool in our current environment to make sure that schools are able to have safe operations if in fact, teachers had to be quarantined or, for whatever reason. And so that is something that was meant as a temporary help. People who get the subcerts are good for, I believe, 3 years. So once you get it, you get it. But after this year, they're not intending to allow this variance to continue. Finally, we have received guidance from DESE that we need to continue our normal teacher evaluation with our normal evaluation instrument. I have discussed this with teachers at TLC and also at PDC. Which is fine. Our principals are in and out of Zoom classrooms and it's learning classrooms all the time. Our instrument actually will be perfectly usable in the current environment, but it is something that we wanted to be very transparent about so that folks would know that, that will continue and all of our normal reporting requirements will still be in place for the end of this calendar year. And that is the end of my DESE report. Do you have any questions about any of those things? All right, I'll keep going. Next one's all about the money. So one of the other things we normally do this time of year is come to you to let you know how our federal grants are looking for the school year. This one's a little longer because we've been fairly successful in applying for some of the CARES Act money that is now coming. You can see our title programs grant. So between Title I, Title II, and Title IV, if we exclude the money that is passed on then to Boys Hope, Girls Hope, and Little Flower, you see that MRH's share is right around $200,000. I got news yesterday that they did some magic at DESE, and so we're getting about $7,000 additional dollars as they're giving us back some of the money they took last year from bypass. So that number will actually be just a little over $200,000. If we look at the CARES Act money, we did receive the largest chunk of that money, or the ability to draw down from the largest chunk of that money actually when the CARES Act first came out under the ESSER funds. That's $118,751 that you see that can be used for a wide range of expenses that were unplanned due to COVID. Since that time, we have successfully applied for and received approval for the Access Grant, which will help us pay for the Wi-Fi hotspots that we have now out for students. We've successfully received the Transportation Grant, which is an additional $7,000 that we are using to pay for electric static sprayers and cleaning supplies for those buses and bus runs. And I have a grant on my desk that we intended to submit today. But we've been working with the county and DESE, so we actually have to make a slight adjustment based on how they're interacting with each other. But that should be in the neighborhood of an additional $21,000. And I don't anticipate trouble getting it, but I didn't want to put that amount on here until we know for sure that we would be awarded it. Just other state education grants that we regularly get are PAT Perkins and the CTE grant, so that you see that. I talked to you earlier about the ISA grant. We're not actually receiving money, but we're receiving services. So I know those coaches have been partnering with the buildings in terms of additional supports for teachers who are working in the virtual environment. And then we still have that garden grant that is $34,000 that will be funding our greenhouse and some improved landscaping and outdoor spaces at the elementary school. And those have been paused just momentarily, but those plans are very much in place and will be moving forward. And then you see at the very bottom there, we have tried 2 other grants that we were unsuccessful in receiving. And that's just because, again, the state and the county have deemed us as not needing help with purchasing additional technology devices. I'm not sure how they did those calculations, but we were not eligible for those grants.
Roxana, as far as the CARES dollars that we've received, have those all been through DESE and the state pool, or have some of those been through the St. Louis County pool?
So everything that we've actually qualified for and been approved for are through the state. Initially, we were told the county was not going to be participating in the matching grant. And then they were, and then it's been a journey. So we have all of that prepared. The way that this particular grant, the supply grant, is through the county. The county will pay 75% of our costs, up to $20.96 per student. So we take our student enrollment number, and then they'll give us 25% of that amount, and the state will match with, the county will give us 75%. The state will only match 25% if the county gave us the 75%. So this one that has the question marks is the county grant that's available to us, which we intend to file tomorrow.
Thank you. I know there are layers and layers in the CARES funding. Other questions or concerns, comments? All right. We will move forward then to an update from Mr. Whalen.
Thank you very much. Tonight's update is going to deal with some maintenance and custodial and grounds, transportation, some COVID-19 preparations for the student reentry, and a real brief construction update. Maintenance is continuing to catch up on the routine work orders, and have been working with the schools and making some minor room modifications to implement social distancing in classrooms, office spaces, and equally important, our nurses, our clinics areas, and how we can make that safer for students and staff. We had hoped that the installation of the automatic water bottle fillers would have been completed. However, it's being delayed until either the end of this month or the beginning of November. It's just based on the availability of the equipment. And but we keep being promised that it's going to be soon. And again, just as a reminder to start off with, we are putting a water bottle filler on every floor in all the buildings. That's the start. We didn't want to put just a couple in a building where you had to go to different floors. And as part of the planning for the bond issue construction, we will be adding additional ones as the buildings are renovated. In talking with custodial, in addition to the routine cleaning of the schools, the custodians are perfecting their sanitation protocols. We put things in place, but if we don't practice them now before kids get in, if we don't uncover some issues as they occur in any new procedures, we're not going to be prepared. So I'm very proud of what they're doing. We are setting up time frames during the day that once staff's in the building and they're all out there hitting once in the middle of the morning as also in the afternoon, sanitation of the restrooms, office spaces, entranceways. Likewise, the bus drivers, we have to get them their motor skills back up, or their muscle skills back. It was 7 months since they drove last, but they have protocols between each route. And so they're practicing that. So when we're ready to bring kids back, the support services are going to be ready also. Grounds crew have been performing their routine summer tasks. They're also at this point, which this time of the year they do all the time, they're getting their mulch in for landscape beds and the play pits. In transportation, last week a survey was completed to ascertain the number of students wishing to use MRH transportation. The numbers are established, and Cindy Northern is starting to put together routes for each of the schools, and by next meeting we'll have that in place. Starting this Monday, we were starting to install the plexiglass screens that are going to be on the student desks and those areas, teachers' desks, and those areas that we haven't hit yet. You see a couple of examples sitting over here on the floor behind Kat. We expect us to be completed with this within 3 weeks. Because of the potential of opening and in the sequence of it, we started elementary, we'll then proceed to early childhood, and then lastly, we'll do this building for both the middle school as well as the high school. Let me go on to a brief construction update. On the earlier Tremco projects, the roof replacement at both early childhood and elementary school is completed. Tuck pointing at the early childhood is completed. Here at the high school, we're about 90% complete. They're finishing up the south side of the building. the side that faces Manchester. And we still have some minor tuck pointing to do over on the west side where the gym is. And then the elementary tuck pointing is approximately 75% complete. They're continuing with the HVAC rooftop unit replacement at elementary and here at the high school. And then all 3 schools are receiving brand new DDC HVAC controls within these projects. And as I stated last month, I pushed back the window replacement here at the high school until the spring. We don't need going into the dead of winter having big open holes in buildings as they install this. So that's for the Tremco work. Under Ittner, we did have a bid opening on the 28th for the ECC modular trailer installation. That scope included the installation coordination, concrete foundations, minor site work, electrical and fire alarm installations, and Beck's Construction Services was a successful bidder. This Tuesday, we held a pre-construction meeting between Beck's and the manufacturer Pac Van, as well as Ittner. We expect the work to commence. Well, they've already put their vault out. There's about 90 piers they have to pour before they can bring the trailer in. We're hoping that it will be, the trailer will be in by mid-November. And then before, and so much of this is weather permitting, if a monsoon comes in and they can't do the site work, that'll delay it a little bit. But once the trailers are in, there's a lot of internal work connection with the plumbing, with the electrical, the alarms and the systems. But we are hoping that this will be complete by the end of this fiscal year, end of December. And is there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Edrich, I think you're the next agenda item here.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Let's talk about homecoming briefly. As everybody knows, homecoming at MRH is not just a high school thing. We strive to make it a community-wide, all ages event. Everybody from the youngest learners to returning alumni. In normal times, we have a Spirit Week event in all of the buildings. And I think that's kind of what separates our event from those of other school districts. Anyway, the main celebration, of course, is it's a collaboration by the high school student council, the principals, the band director, choir director, the PTOs, of course, and my department. However, this season, the principals as well as the athletics director are unanimous in their intention to plan for a homecoming event in the spring. That would, of course, coincide with our already stated intention to shift fall sports to that time frame. And it would allow, of course, for more preparation time for the band members and the student council, and that's very important. Right now, we have 2 groups planning imminent events, not as a substitute for homecoming per se, but more as celebrations to kind of temporarily fill the void. The fantastic MRH Boosters Group is contemplating a socially distanced parade. It would look a whole lot like the graduation parade that we saw over the summer. The parade participants would use non-district spaces for staging and disbanding, and the route that they would prefer would take it through the business district to achieve kind of more of a community feel. They would really like to do it on the 14th of November. Other fallback dates would be the 7th or the 21st. They plan on offering signs if parents and kids and businesses want them to display. They also intend to offer some kind of inexpensive photos taken digitally right on the spot and emailed or texted. They plan to encourage students and faculty and the community leaders and businesses to all take part. The district, of course, would assist with communication to the community and, of course, emphasizing safe practices. All of this is contingent upon Maplewood PD's blessing and approval, and I don't think they're at that stage quite yet. They're moving there. Central Office Administration is satisfied with this proposal. We responded to the boosters that they would need to take the lead on the organization of the event, as MRH is not really in a position at this moment to officially formally sponsor a gathering of this magnitude on district property. I mentioned a second group, that would be the high school student council. They approached my office seeking guidance on how a parade could work. I am schooling them on, I guess, the boundaries and the requirements of staging a parade. I have lots of experience with that now, and I'm basically suggesting that they collaborate with the boosters. I think that's the best course of action. A lot of school districts in our area are taking the same approach with homecoming, meaning shifting it to the spring. U-City and Webster Groves are both moving their formal homecoming celebrations to the spring, while also planning smaller events such as this in the coming weeks. So I am ready to address any concerns or questions you may have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ed. Erin.
Yes.
Agenda item.
Okay, can you all hear me? Somewhat. All right. Well, this is the moment everyone's been waiting for, to discuss our proposed timeline for return to in-person learning. And I want to thank the Board of Education for being so conscientious and consistent with finding more data to consider, what is best for everyone, for students, for teachers, for the community at large. So thank you for being so collaborative with us through this process. And what you see is what I've always recommended for this process is 4 weeks from a potential vote to do this. And it's really necessary for us in terms of planning before we actually begin to have students in space. And then you will see on the first column, which you didn't have before, a staggered return that mirrors but 2 weeks before students. I have verbally talked about that, but here you will see, and the community can see the thinking around that. And it wouldn't be all teachers in a building. It would be the grade level 2 weeks before that grade to return. So I'm staggering students and I'm staggering the adults. So the whole idea to have the teaching staff or professionals to come in that capacity is so they can practice protocols and traffic flows and all of the different things that they need in order to keep themselves, to keep the students, anything that they need in order to conduct what life is like in a pandemic. So I want to speak to specifically, I know a letter that came from NEA recently. I was really surprised by the nature of the concerns because of all of the meetings that I've had and Roxana's had. And I spent the afternoon, completely changed my afternoon so I could have conversations with the authors to figure out what was going on. We were able to speak to 3. One was teaching this afternoon. We weren't able to catch up with her. We were only able to wave. But we really were able to unpack the concerns. And I was happy to say that there was a disconnect from what was written and what they were really experiencing and how they felt. And, Roxana, at some point you can share some things as well. But there were things that were very important that make sense to me in terms of their concerns and where we are right now. And I can elaborate on that in just a minute. But just some background with that particular union that we have is an older one. We have 2 in our district, if you don't know. We have NEA and we have MSTA. And NEA really has been dormant for 10 years. There really hasn't been any leadership. So we have a newer teacher who is now taking upon himself to revive and organize and meet with teachers. He feels that it's important, and it is. And he had a UNISERV NEA representative there with him, with a few teachers who essentially wrote the letter. And there was some conversation with the teachers, and they added some things. So having the conversation with that particular teacher and really unpacking what was going on helped us get a better idea of truly what is going on. And the tension right now that we're seeing, it makes sense. They want to know really the details of what it looks like with the things that I'm trying to do once we're about to start. They want to know the protocols. They want to know what lunch looks like. They want to know, and really starting all that's ahead of the board. I didn't want to have all those details if people weren't going to be in the building. Like, I really wanted to make sure, at least that we were thinking, I don't know, I've never worked in a pandemic before. I didn't want to give everyone all of those details. The building principals didn't want to give that level of planning to people if they were at home. And the main thing, when you do this work, when you have in-person learning, it's human behaviors that mitigate spread. It's the things that we do in terms of layers of protection and the work that you do, the fidelity of not slipping up and having your mask like this drives me crazy. You have to mask correctly. You have to social distance. You have to make sure that the cleaning protocols, we got to stay on top of that too. We have the materials and the equipment. We've done all these things, and we have to be vigilant. And that is what I've learned. And I've been in a lot of meetings from spaces where people have been successful with containing the spread. So those are the things that we need to share, teach. We need to also make sure that staff feel the space, get comfortable with the space before students come. And I totally understand where a lot of that angst is coming from because they haven't had that information and they need to be a part of it. And then the second thing, which is more on a macro thing, but I really feel that this needs to happen, from my meeting that I have with the medical professionals, the pediatricians, and the public health individuals, I'm asking them, can they create a learning opportunity, a panel or something that is talking about the science behind COVID for teachers? And what does that look like in schools? And I know they've done that with private and charter. And, you know, we had a representative in the meeting today, and she said they did that and it went over really, really well. The teachers appreciated what does that look like in a classroom? How do you protect yourself? How do you protect kids from the science? And how do we help and educate kids to be safe? Because it's been something in schools before to educate kids about public health issues, like tobacco is one of them. It's something that we don't ever talk about, but how to protect yourself with that. And other things that, you know, have been in schools to, you know, that are public health issues. And so moving forward, I recognize the fact that there were some issues and there still are some issues. And Roxana and I, immediately, we were able to like target and think about what we could do to address teacher concern, because it is very, very important to us. And we value our partners and having them at the table. And this individual, one of the main authors who wants to reinvigorate this particular union, I mean, we had a very good conversation. And I know you had met with him the day before about some things. And we have a list of action items, actually, that we're going to probably start tomorrow or next week with this particular group, because I know I meet with all of my teacher leaders on Wednesday, which my group is going to grow. And really what I ascertained, because this group has been dormant and not really engaging when I didn't know who the leaders really were because they haven't engaged. There was a gap in what was going on and what is being shared, and that happens. So now we're shoring all that up, and we're going to have more people sitting at the table now that we know who they are and we've had conversation. And I don't know, Roxana, from your side of the house, if you want to add anything else to that.
One of the questions. You know, one of the questions that I did have an opportunity to ask was, because the plans for the tiers have not really changed since summer when the teachers helped us develop those. So one of the questions I asked was, are you having an opportunity to sit in your building and really talk through the very specific details, even down to, you know, how do we walk to lunch, you know, those kinds of things. And I think that we heard generally that they were happening, but that sometimes there was a delay and that they felt the principals didn't want to get ahead of the board. And so there's some anxiety about when and how, and some information that they just want some clarity around. So I do think that I think the principals are having the right conversations. I don't think we always know exactly the level of details that make folks comfortable. We also heard from them that some people want lots of information and other people don't want to be overwhelmed by being asked about lots of information. And so I asked a lot of questions about what is the right balance and how do we get the right balance for the individuals for their comfort level. So those are things we're going to continue to explore. We've invited them, as we invite every group that we meet with. TLC had a great conversation with PDC last night about professional development, not just for blended learning, but what do we need to do in terms of making sure that teachers have reflective time to think about our layers of protection, to think about how kids are in the building, and to make sure that those are ongoing conversations so that we can do not only pre-planning, but after action review as things happen. So for example, we just did the ACT administration. It went very well. Sitting down after that administration and talking through what did we do really well, maybe what didn't go so well. We've had to do a very minute amount of contact tracing. So each time we do one of those, we sit and talk about what did we do well, what should we do differently next time. And I do think one of the comments that was made to me today from one of the teachers is the timing loop is sometimes difficult because some people are involved in certain conversations and other people are not. And if we were all on campus together, it's easier to circle and talk than it is when we're only seeing each other in Zoom meetings at predetermined times where it's difficult to have individual conversation. So we've got to think through that a little bit as well.
And so the other thing that I want to add that's stemming from all the work that I'm doing with the regional superintendents, now that
Are you able to hear me? Yeah. Are you able to hear me now? I'm really just gonna talk and I'll try to project. I'm sorry, I'll hear you a little bit now. Okay. I wanted to just, be clear that the Maplewood Richmond Heights NEA is a union. That's correct? Okay. And I also want everyone to know I am a strong proponent of unions. I am a part of a union myself. I think unions are important. And I understand that this union may have been dormant for 10 years, but it's not anymore. And they are representative of some teachers in our district. And I want it just to be clear that they sent a 3-page letter to us. And in that letter, they state, MRH NEA strongly recommends remaining in the virtual model for at least the remainder of the semester to protect the lives of children and their families. I understand that you all have, when I say you all, I mean like Dr. Hall, Roxanne, I understand that you all met with them and you were able to unpack some things, but in this 3-page letter, they really talk about what is to go on, and they don't have any notice of it. And so I'm really looking at this, and I understand that you're saying, you know, there's this new group and you're connecting with them, but at the end of the day, they're still a union and they're making sure that their voices are heard, and I'm listening.
Okay, can I please speak to that?
Sure.
I am not negating their value because they're a union, because I'm inferring that you're saying that I am not finding value in them because they're a union. They're very important. My point is, it's been dormant because they haven't been sitting at the table with us when we've been explaining things. Not that they're less than, I'm sorry, not that they're less than or they're a union or I am discounting anything that they're saying. That's not what I'm saying. The fact is that they haven't been with us when we've been talking about these things and we've been explaining these things. I am concerned. That's why I called them and I wanted to talk to them, because typically we do have conversation. So they don't have to feel that they have to have a letter, that at that moment in time, they can say to administration, why isn't this happening? I am really worried. And that's why I was surprised, because they felt that they couldn't do that. What happened? Why didn't that happen?
So I guess I just don't understand why it's important for us to know that they've been dormant for so long. If they are a union and they are recognized, then how come they weren't being invited to the table before?
Because they were not active. I cannot tell teachers to join a union. That is not my role. That's not my role. If teachers choose not to engage and they choose not to say, I want to sit at the table, that is their prerogative. That if they choose not to meet and have conversations and to talk about school issues, that is their prerogative. I do not keep them from that.
So I guess I'm not clear. This is the first time that MRH NEA has said anything.
Correct.
In 10 years.
Correct. In that manner, yes.
What do you mean in that manner?
They have never, in an organized way, written a letter to administration about anything.
But the district does recognize them as.
Yes, absolutely.
That makes no sense to me. I have been very clear that I want to know that I want the community to know, I want the teachers to know, I want the students to know, I want anybody to know, because that's important for health and safety. So why would that not be discussed? And why would that have anything to do with board?
Let me just clarify that briefly, because maybe I misspoke. I think that they are talking about the tiers plan. I think they are talking about what happens in the tiers plan. I think they are talking about schedules. I think they're talking about safety and PPE. What they have not been talking about is a date or timeline for when things are happening. And so there are just some gaps in terms of practical things that folks want to know. So we heard that a little bit. What I heard was principals are trying to be very sure that they know what they're telling us is actually going to come to fruition. And so sometimes we want dates and timelines, and we have not been able to have dates and timelines. That does not mean that they're not talking about reentry. That does not mean that they're not talking about other things, but they're always details upon details, down to what does it look like if kids eat lunch in our classroom, for example. So that's a lot. That's some of what we heard. I also just want to be clear that when I've reported to you, I've told you that just like in the community, we have some mixed opinions about staff that want to return. We do have some staff members who want to return. We have other staff members who would like to remain virtual, and I reported those numbers to you. So I think this is a very difficult issue for everyone. I think everyone has opinions that work for them. They have strong feelings about that. Everybody has their own personal need of comfort in terms of how much information they want to be told and how involved they want to be. And I think what I was trying to represent also, it's been very difficult because normally I would walk around and drop in and talk to people, or we would allow folks to gather, or the NEA folks in a building would know who they were and they would talk, and then someone would come and talk to us. And in this environment, that has been incredibly challenging. And I think everybody that we talked to today recognized that on both sides. And I think that's what we're trying to reflect to you.
And then also they stressed, and it was not a group conversation, it was individual conversations, is that they want to work together. They want it to be a collaborative effort. And it's just, as she said, Roxanne, is very challenging right now. It's not contentious. We don't want that to be contentious because they're a union or not in a union. We want to make sure that all teachers feel safe. And they, in one individual, they said it's for all teachers. This happens to be in MNEA, but they also want to represent all teachers and have their voice heard as well. So that is critical to us. And because they don't have experience with this process, and the gentleman that really authored this, I guess you could say, because no one really sat down and wrote it, it was a group. He said that I'm new, I don't know the process, because there is a process for these things. You don't typically just send it out to everyone because you really can't get a whole lot done right away. There's a lag, and I don't want anyone to feel like they have to wait to have their answers met or their questions answered or their needs met. We want to be able to have ongoing dialogue because that is who we are, and what we've always done at MRH is to have healthy dialogue. If it's union or not, we want to make sure that we partner and work together, especially in time of a crisis. So I don't want you to think that they're being pushed aside or we don't hear them. The deal is they have to rebuild. He's young. He said, I'm young. I've only been here 4 years. I don't know how this works. And it's not a vibrant group. So they have to work through that. And we're going to work together. We have a project right now that we're thinking about doing together to solicit, more teacher feedback. So please don't think that that's a thing, that we don't want that at all. We want to work together.
So, am I to understand then that there has been a desire amongst our staff to, for a lack of a better term, get used to the blocking and tagging that comes from working in the COVID environment that hasn't been reflected back to the board? Because I don't know that we've been told or asked, hey, can we open up the buildings so that the teachers can come in here and work with the spaces? Have we been at that? So if that's what I'm hearing, is that what's going on? Is that what happened?
What was his question?
Is my question unclear? Let me put it this way. Did staff or has staff or staff representatives like the building principals represented to administration that they wanted to bring the teachers in to work with the spaces? That's kind of what I did.
Well, so teachers, it's been.
I don't remember ever taking any decision or being involved in the decision-making process like that, and I don't think any of our fellow board members have either. Anybody?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some flow of communication that hasn't occurred. That's my point.
And I would just clarify that it is my understanding that we do have both some teachers and some children in the building currently, as we have approved the response to intervention allowance classes. So I think, you know, to
maybe take a slightly different spin on what you're asking is, are the folks that are potentially most nervous about what teaching in person in COVID looks like, having the opportunity to practice right now while they're not
half classes or full classes or things like that.
Part of what makes this difficult to answer is it's hard to generalize staff, right? So Wes, one of the things I would say to you is we've made it optional for staff to be in the building. So we've had a good number of staff in the building at various times all along. Some of them are choosing to come. We have a large number of staff at ECC and at the elementary every day. We've got a fair number of staff in the middle school. I think the high school has generally had the fewest number of staff members on campus. Many of those are setting up routines and practicing. We have other folks that have not yet been on campus. So some of the folks that have been here every day have called me and expressed some nervousness about student return. I have other folks who've been home that we haven't seen that have called me and said they want students back to return. So it's very difficult to answer some of these questions and to project generally for the staff, because as I said to Brandy, we have staff with all different opinions and all different needs in almost all of those areas. So I think to answer your question, Wes, have I had teachers saying, I want to come and practice? Not necessarily, but the principals have said it's very important for them to have that time, for the staff to have reflective time together, and for them to get their practices and protocols in place.
Which reflects, if you look on the board agenda on the left column, the teacher return to building, which I started a moment ago, giving a designated time for those grade levels to come in to prepare specifically for their students to come 2 weeks later.
Yeah, I just have to say that I was really a little bit alarmed by that letter. It implied to me that there was at least a certain degree of the staff that aren't necessarily on board.
That aren't what?
Pause.
That what? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
That gives me pause. That makes me concerned
Okay.
that they aren't, well, I'm trying to be heard. You're apparently having to hear me. It makes me concerned that we don't have everybody on the same page. So.
I would like to hear a little bit more about how the RTI opportunities are going. That, you know, I think it would be easier to talk about, you know, return to learning in person. We can understand what's going on currently. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll ask Vince to speak to that. I can speak to the ACT administration. We had all of our current seniors in for ACT administration. That administration went very smoothly. The students did follow the protocols. They were here with us most of the day. The folks who proctored thought that things went very, very well. Actually, I was very impressed with how that carried out, and how they entered and exited and stayed throughout the day, how they did wearing their masks. Again, that was with our oldest students. Vince has been working very closely with the intervention teams and the SSD teams. What I have heard from the principals is that students have been very excited to be together. They've been following protocols and sitting on opposite sides of the room, but you've worked with that and observed that much more closely. So you may want to speak to that, Vince.
Hey, sure, of course. I think when I think about the return to school, I think it was wise that the board supported the idea of on-campus interventions, because it gave a chance for us to practice protocols and for the students. We've added more students every week. I think we've seen the most activity at the elementary school, middle school, and high school, and some activity at the ACC as well. The ECC does have a lot of teachers back in the building, by the way, teaching from the rooms. The kids are wearing their masks. The kids are following the protocols. They are excited to be here. Their parents are excited to bring them. Things have run on time. We recently were able to extend transportation for some of our homeless students to start with interventions this week. Got the cabs back up and running. It's been a great intermediate step. When I think about all the ways we're preparing for hopefully someday going back to school, whenever that is, the opportunity for teachers have had since the beginning of the year to work in their spaces was one opportunity, optional. The on-campus interventions created more opportunities for faculty. And actually, a few of the teachers that are doing on-campus interventions expressed a lot of concern about being back here in the summer, but they were the first ones to jump on board with on-campus interventions. They've been meeting the kids at the doors and escorting them. The traffic's been really good. Again, it's a small number, but we've had a chance to practice, which has been really good. And I think the potential plan of faculty, if they come back, to be there for 2 weeks in mass to kind of look at the spaces and stuff has been helpful. Just the other day at the ECC, when Mike's team was installing plexiglass, there were a ton of teachers there. So we were all looking at the plexiglass and seeing if it was adequate, and teachers were kind of giving us input. So that was all really healthy and helpful, I think, in terms of our collaborative journey to kind of have kids back in the building. But every week we have more and more students getting on-campus interventions. It's gone well so far.
Yes, I do have a question. Are you able to hear me? Okay. So right now, we are watching our county council listen to comments about whether or not Dr. Page should be able to continue to address emergency procedures during this pandemic. And right now, I think you all are aware that face masks are at issue. And so I'm wondering if you all have discussed the possibility of the mandate of face masks being taken away and what can be done in our school district. Are you all thinking about that at all? Have you had conversations about that? And if so, can you talk to us about that?
So you're asking if you want us to mandate the mask? Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking, have you all had conversations about the possibility of a mandate for face masks being abolished? And what to do if that happens?
The county level order is currently in play, but there is some question that, could that be lifted? What would be the implications for the school district?
I would say that right now, masks are a very important layer of protection for us. And so I would anticipate that we would continue to require that, because that what we've explained to staff and when we have been talking to school districts that have been operating, what we are hearing is that the what keeps both staff and students safe is implementing all of those multiple layers of protection. So even if the county would lift the mask mandate, it would still be something very important for us in our spaces to make sure that our staff was protected and that our students were protected. So I would not anticipate that impacting our protocols.
No, and all the things, and thank you for picking that up. I'm having a hard time hearing everyone. We're not going to change our layers of protection and all the things that we're going to mitigate. We have, I can't recall, and I don't know if Vince or Ed know, we have hundreds of masks right now. We want to make sure that we have at least 2 for our students, cloth masks. And it's a part of what we're going to be teaching our kids and making sure that we reinforce to our staff and our students that this is what we do here. This is the expectation. And that's part of the reason why we have to get started. People need to come in. We need to practice so they know how to engage, meaning the staff, with each other. And not only just with the kids, but practicing the social distancing with each other and what that feels like. Because once you get started, it then becomes second nature and you don't necessarily have to think about it, because it was like that for us too. central office and other workers, we've been here since about June, and we have done things differently. We don't all crowd up in the kitchenette anymore. Only one person can go in there. I sometimes forget, and we always have our masks, but there are things that we had to do. How we use the copy machine is different now. You know, there's other things that we had to do to change our behavior as well. And we all have to do that. And we have to be vigilant about it in order to keep everyone, ourselves, the kids, our peers, safe. But we're not going to stop doing that. There are no plans for doing that at all.
I don't expect you to be able to necessarily answer this, Karen, because it's probably something Cindy might have to look at. But what if that mandate is removed and we're making that requirement and someone refuses to, what kind of support do we have if that mandate has been lifted? Like I said, that's more legal.
No, and that's real. And I know being in conversations with Jeffco superintendents, and that's a whole different world. And then also hearing from, thank you, superintendents that are out in rural parts of Missouri, that's a real thing. And juggling that and trying to enforce that and having high school students that work and then they don't necessarily have to wear their mask at their job. And then they go back to school. So it's very difficult. It's hard to manage that. And do you want to have a consequence for that? You know, those are some of the things that administration and then also the board, what do you want policy around that? So yeah, I think those are good things for discussion.
I think the legal answer that Cindy would say, because I've talked to her about some of these things, is we have the purview, just as we do with any type of procedure or regulation, to set that and expect that. I think to Karen's point, more than the legal question, it is really thinking about what would be the consequence then if someone did refuse. How can we still provide educational services? Right? We wouldn't necessarily. So there are logistical things. We deal with those types of things with student discipline all the time. So you'd have to think of that as a normal student discipline situation, and then think about what are the logical consequences and how do we enforce that while at the same time maintaining the student's education.
Karen, I have one other question, at least at this moment. I know we have not had a meeting in the last week to discuss the health department data, but wondering if you can give us an update on where the 14-day rolling average is. I think obviously there's been a lot in the media over the last week just about the challenges of data. And I think if we are going to be data driven, we have to be confident about the data that we're getting from outside of the district as well.
Absolutely. I don't have the data in front of me to report to you like I normally do. I have about 11 pages. I don't have that. As I sent a response to Wes's, we get it every other day. And so the next report, I can email it to the group on Friday like I did last week.
So just to, sorry. I mean, just to kind of piggyback on that, obviously you're aware of those numbers and have looked at those numbers. And I mean, for tonight's recommendation, in addition to the timeline, you are maintaining the recommendation that you had
at
a while
this time.
back,
that is correct.
Given all of the other information that you're.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And my thing is, yes, that is correct. And what happens with this, it's going to fluctuate. And you all have seen that since you've watched in the past few weeks. You will see it will go to green, it will go to red, then back to yellow. What I also would wanted to recommend is to look at that Friday and to really get clear on how you wanted that to look if by chance you decided to move forward with a yes vote, looking at that data, and then also talking about contact tracing and quarantining and the other developments that we have in preparing teachers for students. I think those regular updates would be important to embed that in those Friday meetings, so you all would know week by week what are the developments. And then also I asked Ed to prep our website on how we would update the community on, you know, cases and quarantining and everything, so we have that level of transparency, because that is a best practice and what other districts are doing to let people know what is going on specifically in our district. So I want to make sure that you all know week by week as we progress. And we haven't talked, so Katie, I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of turn, that would be one of the recommendations, that if we continue with that Friday, I would like for it to be more, just so you know what our developments are with bringing kids in. Just a recommendation, of course, if you all make that vote.
All right.
I had
Go ahead, Glenn.
a question on this data. A couple weeks ago at one of our work sessions, we were discussing the zip code and per 100,000 data for new cases. I got the impression that there was going to be.
Yeah, I haven't had an answer back from her yet, so I apologize for that.
We don't know the. Okay.
Yeah, I haven't gotten back from spring yet.
Okay.
All right. Obviously, I had a chance to digest this. Any other questions or concerns at this point? All right. We will move forward then in the agenda. Let's see here. The calendar discussions. I was also, I mean, the only thing that I wanted to discuss on the calendar is, you know, to call attention to the fact that we do have those Friday meetings. I'm not sure, you know, we haven't, I think the original purpose was to have a meeting on weeks when we weren't already meeting in person, but also to have some specific time. I'm to look at the COVID data. I'm not sure that has panned out in the way exactly that we had thought it would. And I'm not sure that it's something that is really working well for the board members' schedules too. So while I think it's obviously still important for us to have time to discuss both the health department wide world data as well as our district context, I'm not sure that meeting is the meeting for that. I don't know if there's any other thoughts, or that I actually know that that time is probably not going to work personally for me. That doesn't mean the rest of the board can't do it, but just think it's something we probably need to look at. And I would, and I recognize that there are things that are on the calendar, and then when they're on the calendar and they come off the calendar, whether they just disappear or are listed as canceled, I think that is potentially sending some problematic messages out into the community. It's not that we've canceled meetings because we don't think that they're important or that this opportunity to discuss this isn't prioritized. It's that we had already met and talked about that information the day earlier, or we didn't have an update from the county, and so there wasn't anything to talk about, sort of thing. So that was, I just wanted to kind of call that out, and I think the board probably needs to huddle with Karen about what that looks like going forward. I'll move it along then to Joe's Place. If there's an update there.
Can you hear me? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. As I was saying, kind of had a brief summary, and we do have two young men who did return back this semester, and they're doing well academically. But at the same time, there's two more that's possibly in the process who will be attending Joe's Place next semester. Financially, there have been some community members who've been able to continue to give donations, and amongst these 16 community members, about $8,000 has been raised. So that was a great thing to hear. And also, there's a gentleman in the community who's been picking up trash in the Maplewood area, and through his efforts, he has raised about $1,200. So we're thankful for that. But at the same time, there's some alumni who had experienced some difficulties and due to the pandemic and have lost jobs up there. One is kind of in the process of possibly making some career choices, and another one is going to be moving out of town. But there have been some assistance from residents in the area who've helped some of these young men, particularly with some furniture and special needs that they may have. But it's really important, I think, that as board members, we've talked about having some groups among ourselves to do some more community partnerships and also with some funding. So that is something that the board is going to be working on here over the next quarter or so. So we want to really help the alumni who are having some challenges, and some of them may need some tutoring or some mentorship. So I think the Joe's Place board wants to do as much as possible to try to get some additional funding to come in and be able to help our young men as they leave from there. But we want to keep track of them just to see how well they're doing. So I believe the board is heading in the right direction to do whatever we can to make sure that these young men become successful in whatever area they choose. So it's important, I think, that we all get on board as board members to make sure that these young men are successful in their career. So if anyone among us that you know of would like to make some kind of contribution or help in some way, we would love to hear about it. So kind of appreciate. Sure.
So the fall newsletter will be coming out in late November, and we'll have a wish list for the boys, which is a great way to connect. So if everybody will look for that newsletter, and then also we got to congratulate the house parents.
Yes.
Amber and Matt, because they recently got married.
Yes. Okay.
Lovely. Thank you both for your service on the Joe's Place board. And then the last board update here being on SSD. While we have not had a governing council meeting since we last met, I will just acknowledge that Karen and I, as well as Ben Gleason and Kim Gifford, did meet with Dr. Keenan from SSD virtually a few weeks ago, just to continue to express our concerns about the services that SSD is able to provide, or the follow-up that's happening around IEPs and the supports that students are needing in virtual learning. I believe we did get the update from Vince that we are moving forward with becoming an assessment site for SSD evaluations. And again, I know we have had outreach from many parents who have expressed both their gratitude and their concerns, and I think continuing just to point parents to Mr. Gleason first and foremost, and that SSD services obviously should be continuing, even though not all of them translate one-to-one to the virtual environment. Great. So with that, I will pass it over to Chris for financial updates.
There we go. Hope everyone can hear me now. Okay, so I will start with the financial statements. Is that correct? Thank you. Okay. So the items of interest do a pretty good job of hitting the high points on here. And not to belabor this, so I'll go through these quickly. Typically, I'll go through the revenues by their categories, but I can tell you that right now we're at 5.6% on revenues collected through September. Those are in line with where they have been in past years for operating funds, that is. You will notice that there was a 2% increase, 1.5% increase to the prior year, and that was just due to timing on some of our funding. Looking at the breakdown of our operating funds, you'll see that our local taxpayers and other local sources comprise 85% of our revenues budget, 10% by the state, and then county, federal are smaller. On expenses, we are tracking typically where we would be on instructional, support services as well. Parents as teachers, preschool, you'll notice is significantly behind. That's due to currently no tuition-based services are in session at the moment. So that is to be expected. You'll see a budget amendment a little bit later that will address that. You'll also see construction and debt is up slightly. And that is because we are starting to expend funds related to Prop E projects. Salaries and benefits are tracking right around where we would expect them to be at this point in the year. Purchase services, as we've talked in prior months, are slightly under mostly due to professional development and travel being suspended through while we deal with this COVID crisis. Supplies are right where we would expect them to be at this time of the year, as our capital outlay is significantly lower. And that's just because we've put a pause on some things as we're waiting for the Prop E projects to fully kick in. Debt service is where we had expected it to be. Bond issue funds, you'll see that there's really nothing there yet, but again, I will show you a budget amendment in the next agenda item that will address this. Salary and benefits does make up 75% of our expenditures, and you can see the percentages on the other are significantly less than that. At the end of September, our budgeted fund balance as a percentage of expenditures is projected to be 43%. I will be showing you a budget amendment in the next item that will adjust this slightly. All in all, MRH is currently in a very good financial position to weather the financial and economic crisis that we're dealing with as a result of COVID. Any questions? All right, Katie, with your permission, I'll just move ahead. Okay, I will go through this quickly. There's a lot of pages to it, and I will hit the high points. So on local revenues, you'll see a decrease here. This is our general fund. This is directly related to our Discover Club program not being in session. So we are asking to adjust the budget down $118,700, and this will take Discover Club revenues to zero through December. Expenditures moving around slightly due to some adjustments on staffing that come from the general fund, as well as increase due to some purchase services such as consultants, and supplies increase slightly as a result of COVID. Moving on to the special revenue fund, which we also call the Teachers Fund or Fund 2. The $250,000 reduction in revenue here is a direct result of the loss of tuition due to the preschool program not being in session. So we were expecting that. Federal revenue is up slightly for a net loss on revenue, a net reduction in revenue of $200,000. Expenditures budget increases to salaries and benefits related to some of the changes we've already discussed in prior months, middle school TA, and some additional increases to FTEs that were already on the books. The debt service fund, here we have changes that are related to our bond refunding that we did as a result of our bond sale for Prop E. And you can see here that we have increased the expenditures to account for the new bonds, and also at the projected fund balance as of June 30, you can see that we have sufficient fund balance to cover our debt payments for our bonded indebtedness. Capital projects fund. So no changes here on the revenue side, slight changes in the result of on the capital outlay side. Big change on the principal and interest side. As a result of the bond sale, we were able to pay off some of our debt that was existing in the capital side of our budget, or excuse me, operating side of our budget. So these are the reduction due to those payments no longer existing. This is the exciting one. So this is our bond issue fund. So we are amending the budget to account for the bond sale plus premium. Okay, so this is where I need to explain just a little bit, and I won't belabor this, but all of the changes that I just showed you get washed out once I add in the $33 million of bond funds. So this one doesn't do us a whole lot of good. So I'm going to ask you to scroll to the next one. This removes the bond fund so that we can see a truer look of what our operations and budgets look like without the bond. So as I present things from month to month, I'll be careful to alert you to that, because it's really easy for the numbers to get lost in that big $33 million number, okay? So you can see here that revenues are decreasing $318,000, and expenditures are decreasing slightly at $60,000. All in all, this is a 1% change to our fund balance on this particular amendment. Now, we do plan to bring these to you as often as once a month, just depending on decisions that the board makes and what's going on with the economy and funding, both on the state, local, and federal levels. We don't want to assume and adjust our budget before those things are known. So we'll adjust them as we learn them. And then, of course, the line item detail, which I know is Brandy's favorite part at the end here. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you.
You've got one more, Chris.
Oh, do I?
COVID expenditure.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't have my agenda in front of me. All right, so I did promise that I would continue tallying the expenses that we've incurred as a direct result of COVID. So I won't read these to you. Let me show my screen though, so that our guests can see this. There we go. So we have added significant expenses here. We're showing you both the expenses that have been reimbursed through the CARES Act. Everything that's been reimbursed thus far has been through the through the Fed. And we're using some of these larger purchases in the technology realm to account for those. So those drawdowns are being done. Also P cards, those are a little bit out of time. So that's why that says P cards amount encumbered as opposed to expended. All in all, plexiglass dividers is probably the most notable change at this point. Mike Whelan, the Buildings and Grounds team, have been working with SM Wilson to make sure that we have the correct protective measures in place in all of our classrooms. And that is ongoing as recently as today. All said, we are about $400,000 into our COVID exclusive expenditures at this point through September. Actually, this is through October 12th.
And Chris, the two items with lines through them, the Screencastify license and Chromebooks and consoles, are those things we're not planning on purchasing now, or?
Those were reallocated.
Okay. Great. Any questions there? All right. Thank you very much. All right, we'll move into our action items then. The return to in-person learning proposal. I'd like to make a motion that the MRH school district remain in the tier 3 or fully virtual through the end of the first semester of this school year. Thank you, Brandy. That's the motion. Any questions, discussion there?
Procedurally, just a question. Oh, okay, I see. So voting on this, and then if, you know, the proposal in front about the tier or about the return to learning piece might be a secondary added agenda item.
So the return to in-person learning proposal doesn't come with a specific motion. It's a recommendation. So from that recommendation,
I see.
I'm making the motion to remain fully virtual.
Oh, okay. Okay, as opposed to voting on the proposal to return to in-person?
Correct. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. 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 All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Any abstentions? All right, the motion passes. Motion on executive session.
In accordance with section 610.021, subsections 2, 3, 9, and 13, and section 610.022 of the revised statutes of Missouri on October 15, 2020, for the following specific reasons: personnel matters, real estate matters.
Do I have a second? Thank you, Brandy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are in executive session. Thank you.